Okay, so I'm going to take you guys out, and then I will do my little opening, and then you guys will come in after the intro music. All right, so I'm just going to remove you guys real quick. All right, and I am ready, Wes. Hey everyone, I'm Sunny Shell, and tonight we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. Remember, if you're a patron, you can receive a link to join us on the show and ask your own questions. We love your questions and try to answer them all, but super chats take priority. So sit back, buckle up, and let's get to the sunny spot on Skeptic Haven. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to introduce our guests. The first one is not a stranger to us. So we have Pocket Locker 86, and we have another guest, Cliff. So the first thing I'd like to do is have you guys tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you. So let's start with Pocket Locker.
Sure. So my name is Jay Bundy. I had the fortune of being with you guys a few weeks ago. Really happy to be back. I'm recently received a dual PhD from Michigan State University in integrative biology and ecology, evolutionary biology, and behavior. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Minnesota. And my research is primarily in using digital organisms to test evolutionary theory. And I also teach. I've been teaching at Michigan State, and this semester I'll be teaching biology for non-majors, sort of like an intro biology at Normandale Community College. So excited about that.
That's really cool. And I know last time that you were on, I was totally geeking out, and I think we had a really great show the last time. So thank you for coming back.
Absolutely happy to be here. Happy to bring Cliff with me. And also, I see some of my mods and stuff in the chat. We're over at Pocket Locker 86. So looking for new subscribers and hoping some of your friends will come over and join us.
Absolutely. I definitely recommend that. So Cliff, let's talk a little bit about you. Who are you, and how can we find you?
My name is Cliff Baum. I'm currently a PhD student at Michigan State. I'm also in integrative biology. Mostly I do computer modeling to study basic evolutionary theory on the one hand, and on the other hand, I'm interested in evolution of basic cognition. So very simple sort of cognitive architectures and how evolution can form these structures. And I'm late coming to academia. I had a whole career. I kind of had two careers before I got here. You can get into that if you want. But I'm sort of the poster child for you can change what you're doing. You're not committed to a life path. You can basically change what you want to do at any point.
Yep, that is absolutely true. I completely agree with that. And one of my really good friends didn't get her PhD until her 60s.
Wow.
Yep. And
Fantastic.
Yep, you are. It's never too late. Follow your dreams. So.
I definitely think
at the rate I'm going, I'll be 60, but I'm 52. So hopefully not, but I'm getting there.
I think it's something that we should kind of talk about a bit, just in this community, because there are some other content creators like Heathen Queen, I think, is applying to grad school, and a lot of your fans will know Gustick Gibbon, who's a grad student. Mm-hmm. But I really feel like this is a community that does learning for fun, right? I often say as academics, we kind of do the scholarship we're paid to do, but most of us don't go home and then do other research or other scholarship in our spare time. So I think it shows that the people in this community have an unusually high sort of academic motivation, right? They literally think learning is super fun and you can do it all night and all week long. So I would definitely encourage especially this community, if you're interested in going back to school, we would certainly encourage you to do that. And if you want some help with the process, come over and chat with us. We'd love to encourage you that way. We know you guys are geeks, so happy to be amongst like-minded people. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Wes and I were just talking about that behind the scenes earlier about how it's a proud thing for us to say that we are geeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Geeks rule the world, really.
And honestly, not to get too political, right? But we're seeing a lot of the blowback of anti-intellectualism, right? And so, not only is it's something to be proud of, but it's something to fight for now because we're seeing it really make a difference. Absolutely.
Yes, we are nerds. Yes, we are. And I know, we have a show to get on to, but you really touched a really important thing there. We've had a big backlash, but I'm curious what you guys think is the reason why. I've read a couple things, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. But just while we're talking about this really quickly, what do you guys think the reason is that there's been such a pushback for academia and, frankly, for anything science or anything that's higher learning? Why do you think that is?
Cliff, you want to take a shot at it first, or?
Oh, you go ahead.
All right. So for me, it really seems like a culture thing. I know I grew up in a pretty religious family, and there wasn't a lot of value placed on, there was a lot of like stay in school, right? You always heard stay in school, education's important, but it really seemed to be all about utility, right? It was like go to school, get a good job that pays well, right? There wasn't the sort of encouragement of just pursuing, whatever you're passionate about. I remember one time in grad school, my mom said this. She said, "I really envy the fact that you didn't just take like a corporate career, that you actually found what you're intellectually passionate about and made that your pursuit." And she said she wished she had that opportunity. Of course, I wouldn't have had that opportunity had she not gone the corporate route, right? So I do think there's sort of a generational thing there where, maybe there's not as much emphasis on intellectual pursuits, but certainly for me, it all comes down to religion, right? Because I think for me, that's where the most of the pushback seems to come from, and I think it's just because that it's a conflict of epistemology, right? I always say, science is expressing uncertainty in face of the best evidence possible. And religion often asks us to be certain without any evidence. And so I do think there's sort of a natural clash of those two things. And I think when that aspect of people's lives becomes so important to their identity, it spills out into other areas like their politics and, the way they socialize. But I always try to remember that I don't think anybody intends to be that way, right? I play drums at a fundamentalist evangelical church, even as an atheist, and I can tell you they harbor all of the anti-intellectual ideas, right? They're young earth creationists, they don't buy in evolution, they're probably, vaccine skeptics and all of this stuff, but they never got up in the morning wanting to be that way, right? They never woke up and said, I want to cut off my opportunities to be a scientist in the future. I want to make really bad medical choices. So to me, it's a cultural thing more than an individual thing, as hard as it is to remember that.
I tend to agree with you. Cliff, what are your thoughts?
Well, one, I think that there may be a bit of an ebb and flow to people's opinion about science. I think we amazingly, we all have stupendous technology. I mean, cell phone technology, internet access. I don't know if you've used Chat GPT, but that technology is pretty insane, and it's right there. But it doesn't feel new. It doesn't feel like we're doing science, right? We're not going to the moon. We're not. The discoveries are all these small incremental discoveries. I'm hopeful that if we actually have a new sort of, colonization of the moon, hopefully it doesn't turn into a economic, political nightmare, but it actually sparks people's enthusiasm about science and discovery again. But I just think we haven't had that in a while. But I also think that there is a lot of profit to be made by having people fight over stupid stuff. I think that the 24-hour news cycle, and they've really perfected that, right? So we're going to hype everything. There's been a lot of over-promising, because when they do report on science, which is rare, they over-promise, and people have gotten fed up with, science said that they were going to be able to do X, but where's my flying car? And you're like, science did not say that. The news said that, inflating some science stories so that people would watch it.
Yeah.
Sonny,
and then I think you can't get it from MAGA and Trumpism, and that is, and I don't know how political you guys are, but I think it's a thing.
Yeah. I do too.
So, Sonny, I wanted to quickly ask you, what do you think? Because, we're over at Pocket Locker 86. We stream twice a week together, Mondays and Wednesday afternoons at 1 p.m. Eastern, mostly related to programming our experiments. But then sort of when I'm not working, I'm also a counter apologist, right? But I'm new, right? And so I wonder, as somebody who's probably been doing this a bit longer and maybe having broader conversations, what your thoughts are, because I think you probably see more than we do. We tend to get stuff that's focused on anti-evolution. And then the other thing is, do you think that there's like a silver lining in all this, because they're having all these scientific conversations, even if they start from, these weird debates?
So very good questions. Okay, so some of the things that I think are part of the problem, or part of the reason that we're having so much of this pushback, is everything that you guys said is spot on, in my opinion. And we can't get over the facts of the last 5 years, the Trumpism and the, but I think it started even before that, with the marriage of government, of politics and religion, because it didn't just become your religious perspective. Your politics then become a part of your how you define yourself, and it becomes very personal in that way. And so you can't really. People have a hard time distinguishing between their religion and their politics, which means that the things that become political for, with agendas that people have in DC, then translate to the way that the general public views things, because they, it's gospel to them in a sense. And we've seen the detriment in that with the anti-vaxxer, especially with COVID and what that has caused, and people not even wanting to mask, let alone anything else.
Right.
So that's one thing. Another thing that I heard, I was listening to another podcast about this, is that those in academia have had a very difficult time really discussing science or these touchy areas, because we tend to be up here in our dialogue, and when people are down here, we tend to respond to them with something that they end up interpreting as us being egotistical, or we're talking down to them. We're not meeting them where they are and having a discussion. And I'm not saying that they are lower, but I'm saying that when you are in academia, you use different jargon, you use different language. And if someone doesn't have that language, because you're used to in academia having these major debates with other intellectuals, and it becomes contentious, but in a good way. It's like you're really using your brain trying to hammer things out, and trying to go from there to a discussion on Twitter or Facebook. That's a very difficult transition to make. Yeah. And so we're looked at as being egotistical and entitled, and all of those things, and how we can better communicate our message I think is going to make a big difference. And I do think that it is a positive because people are talking now about religion. I mean, a big thing that people do is talk about religion. You know, do you believe in God? Why do you believe in God? Let's really look at your epistemology and find out if it's valid or not. I mean, even the Christians are wanting to do this. The religious, not just Christians.
Wow. Yeah.
They're wanting to engage in those conversations. If they didn't, we wouldn't have things like the atheist experience and Talk Heathen being so popular. So I think that people are ready to engage in that stuff, and we need to be ready to meet them where they are. We need to be willing to have those discussions in a way that doesn't alienate them with our first word. So. Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I kind of want to push back because I think that there's a couple of you're taking a very sort of genuine approach, and you're assuming like, and I don't know that the mass of individuals who we're talking about necessarily are the problem, but I think that there are people with an agenda. And whether that's a political agenda or it's a religious agenda, they really believe this, who are not acting in good faith. And one of the things that I'm kind of fascinated, if I was a sociologist or a historian, like a modern historian, one of the things I would want to follow, I'd spend my time on, is documenting the evolution of arguments, of theist and atheist arguments. Because I'm even flat Earth arguments. I'm fascinated. I watch too many of these things. I don't watch them because I have a concern, right? Or that I think that they're going to if they come up with some new data, that would be great. They don't. They just come up with repackaged arguments. But what's amazing is watching how the arguments change over time and watching how they spread through different communities. So you sort of hear something on Discord, or you see it in a Reddit forum, and then maybe like 2 weeks later, that thing comes up on Atheist Experience, right? And like it's just these communities are they're interrelated, and so are the atheist communities. So the responses are also interrelated, and you've got almost this competitive. These two competitive sides of the argument, but some of the arguments are entirely disingenuous. They're just engineered to be difficult to refute, and that's why they're fascinating and they're frustrating. I mean, they're beyond frustrating because you're just like, oh, the fact that you just said those words means we're going to spend half an hour unpacking what you just said, so that I can explain to you why it's not right. But no one has time for that. So they just go, oh, so you can't refute it. And they're like, oh, okay, that's amazing, right? So now I have to go back and think of a really smart way to unpack that in 30 seconds, or else I lose I don't debate.
So true. That is so true.
How much is it that people are being manipulated into these positions as opposed to they're coming there on their own is, what I'm kind of curious about.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we could actually do a whole other show on that.
It'd be a fun one.
We kind of all of a sudden we are.
That's fun.
But I did. It was brought up, and I just could not help myself. I had to go down that rabbit hole just a little bit. So I appreciate you guys giving into that with me a little bit.
Sure.
So getting back to the discussion, when we were behind the scenes before the show started, we were talking about the topics that we really want, where we want to go with this particular topic. And Cliff, I was really interested in what you said that you are more well-versed in, because what I wanted to start off with was kind of what is the evolution of AI, or, how did we get to where we are now?
Yeah, so
and I think... Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I was just going to say, Cliff, maybe it's good for you to, because we were talking about how we evolve artificial intelligence, whereas, most of what people think of when they hear artificial intelligence is done through machine learning. And I think Cliff can maybe give us a high-level view of the difference, right? And then we can dive more into the evolving side.
Absolutely. Sure. I think that's a great idea.
So when we talk about artificial intelligence is loosely categorized as any computational model system that performs some cognition. So there are lots of different forms of artificial intelligence. For example, one form of artificial intelligence was literally programming a set of binary questions. These things were called expert systems. And so you would be a doctor, and the patient would come in, and it would say, take the patient's temperature. Is it normal? Yes, no. And if it's not, they would say, oh, ask the patient if they smoke. Do they smoke? Yes, no. And then it would go down the tree, and it would end up at, oh, this person has, a fever. Oh, this person, has a broken arm, whatever, right? And these were actually a kind of a big deal for a while. And now a lot of artificial intelligence has moved into into artificial neural nets and backpropagation. And basically, what an artificial neural net is you have a system with inputs. Think of that as your eyes and your taste buds and your nose, and outputs. And you can think of that as your motors or your legs, right? The way that you move around, or perhaps you have a pencil in your hand and it's writing down the answer. That would be your output. And then internally in the model, you've got a bunch of nodes. And the way that the typical artificial neural network nodes work is they accumulate, they're connected to the inputs. So the values from the inputs come into the node. They go through some kind of function. Usually it's a summation and then some kind of thresholding. But there are other functions that you could put in there. And then there may be multiple layers. So the outputs from those nodes may go to other nodes. And then eventually they get to the output. And the way that they train these things is they provide them with an input where they know what the output should be. They look at what the output is. Then the back propagation is they actually trace backwards and say, what values would I have to change within the nodes in order to get what I wanted? Right? And that's how back propagation works. So basically they go in and they tweak it a little bit. And the thing is, you don't want to tweak it too much, because let's say you want to train a system that can recognize numbers. If you push it too far, too quickly, maybe it'll learn to recognize a 2, but it won't be able to recognize anything else. So you keep showing it pictures of 2s and 3s and 5s and 4s and 9s. And after each one, you tweak all the values within like how this thing is connected internally. And eventually it gets the answer right 99% of the time. So that's backprop. So what I do is different than that, right? That uses a feedback mechanism. So that says I have a data set and I know what the answers are supposed to be for my data set, and then I train it on that data set. In my case, what I do is I say, well, I don't necessarily have that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the information into the brain. I'm going to have it run through, and one of the models I use is artificial neural nets. And then the data is going to come out the bottom, and I'm going to score them. And if they score well, then they're more likely, I'm going to have a population of these brains. If they score well, they're going to be more likely to reproduce. If they score poorly, they're more likely to die off. And when they reproduce, they get mutated. So we just apply some random mutations to the connections within this brain, and that generates a new brain that's a little bit different. And then we test the new population, and we just keep running that process over and over again. And eventually the brain comes up with a structure. There are some interesting consequences. So one of the side projects I'm involved in is looking at information theory and how the data is stored within these structures, and how data basically flows through these structures. And some colleagues just did some work where they were looking at how the backpropagation basically ends up distributing the data very widely through the structure, whereas evolved structures tend to have more finite. It clusters the data more, which kind of makes sense if you think about the process. But anyway, that's a total tangent. So did any of that make sense? Do you have a question?
It actually did. And in fact, I have a couple questions, but this one I think was very interesting. It kind of went along with what I was thinking. So Logan Fisher asks, does tweaking equal allele mutation, excuse me.
So in the case of backpropagation, it's not really a mutation because you're not randomly tweaking them. You know the answer you want, and so you're tweaking the values to get the answer you want. So it's kind of like if you have an equation and it's like 2x plus y equals 7, and you solve for x and y, right? Backprop basically does that, but rather than simply putting in the values, they take the values that were there and they nudge them in the direction so that they don't it's called overfitting, right? If they went all the way there, they would overfit and they would only be able to solve one problem. But they want to make this, so it's more general.
So it really, in some sense, comes down to how we think of design versus evolution, right? Like if you are designing, you start with the solution in mind. You have normally a very similar data set where you've already done this, whereas our approach is very, it's not forward thinking. It has no foresight. It's literally natural selection. Cliff, would you talk a little bit more about that, right? Because that's, I think for most lay people, right, that's going to be a big part of thinking of the difference in these two approaches.
Yeah,
sorry, I got distracted by a comment. I'm going to answer that. So backprop is effectively a form of reinforcement learning. I agree with that. Now, what were you saying?
I was just
Jay?
saying that's sort of the difference in the two approaches sort of gets at how we think of design, right? One's almost not reverse engineering, but close in the fact that you've got to have a similar data set and known solutions, and then you're tweaking to get it better. Whereas with us, you're thinking evolutionary with like no foresight. It's just sort of the unfolding, and you're letting the evolution solve the problem.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, in the one case, you kind of one of the problems with backprop is that because you're going in the direction of the solution, if there is a bad configuration that's kind of halfway between where you are and the solution, that can be a problem. You can basically end up in a local optima and you're kind of stuck. Evolution can also end up in a local optima, but because it's a random process, particularly if you run multiple replicates, you're not likely to sort of, there are times where there are attractors that will, there'll be whole fitness landscapes where they'll be like, no matter where you are, you're going to get sucked into a certain point. But it's more of a chance process. So the ability to explore the algorithmic space, what it can do, is different. I won't say it's better or worse. For certain problems, it's better, and for certain problems, it's worse. Yeah,
the place where we train, where Cliff's getting his PhD, where I got mine, that's like their hallmark thing. Is they love to throw sort of evolutionary algorithms at a problem, and then a room full of engineers at the same problem, and show how evolution will come up with a cooler response. But when it does, that's why. It's because it's not having those systematic biases guide it towards human intuitive improvement versus it just will find very counterintuitive ways. And one example is that they love to talk about what is it, Cliff? It's like a space. It's a NASA telescope.
It was an antenna. They needed an antenna that they could put on a rocket, and it needed to pick up a certain frequency, but also it needed to be able to handle vibration. And it ended up with this little curly little
funky
thing,
paperclip looking thing.
It's like this janky paperclip, and it does the job perfectly. Like, nope, there it is. That's way better than anything anyone even thought of.
Yeah. There's another one where you get they were trying to design airplane wings, and you get this really weird tip shape that looks kind of like half wings folded up, pointed the wrong direction, but you can fit twice as many passengers on it or something, and it flies fine. So yeah, that's sort of the hallmark is just, look, if you told me to design something that flies, I probably wouldn't come up with a bird, but apparently that's an effective solution. So evolution is that's what it does. It comes up with weird things we wouldn't design. Yeah.
So there was another question that came up as you were talking. Are you using fuzzy logic and AI now to allow for things like tall or short?
So I am not. I have a collaborator who is constantly trying to integrate fuzzy logic. I will say that I'm working with some of the architectures that I work with are work in continuous value space, and so they're not restricted to basic logic. They can do mathematical operators, and I think they could probably generate fuzzy logic kind of calculations or equations using that. But yeah, I have one collaborator who's really interested in the idea of fuzzy logic. Basically, from my very basic understanding, is sort of you have true and false, and so you can leave a node in a state, which is an undetermined state, and then you're not committed one way or the other.
Is that the technical term?
As far as I know, right? I am not a mathematician. I'm a computer scientist who basically got accepted into integrative biology, even though I've never touched an animal. That came out. Well, actually, no, I've never touched an animal.
Yeah, that's how most of us. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I my study organism is digital. I have nothing to do with anything wet or squishy, and yet here I am. I'm a zoologist, so go figure.
Yes, I always thought that was funny. The zoologists who don't deal with any animals. Now, Sonny, you were interested in these sort of cognitive structures, so maybe Cliff could show us the different types of brains and sort of what you've learned about sort of different tasks that they're good at, because that stuff's very visual. Cliff, show the people some cool graphics, Cliff.
Sure. I can, I guess. Yeah, I don't want to do like a talk, so I want to do like. How do I show stuff here? Can I?
Present. Yes, present, share screen should be the way to go. Yes.
Okay. All right, let me get myself set up here. I'm gonna move me around. Let's see if I don't crash my computer. Very exciting. All right, so this is slides from a talk that I gave. But I'm not going to give the whole talk because it takes 15 minutes. So here we go.
In the meantime, there was a starred question. What is the best image generating neural network that can be used at home besides Stable Diffusion? I have no idea, although I think Emily Dolson might know. Cliff, is that an Emily Dolson question?
What's the best? I don't know. I mean, there are new ones coming on all the time. So I mean but I mean it's sort of the AI generative. The AI generative stuff is I mean those are just AI that can generate that. So I mean that's not really about visualization. That's more about these are things where you type in a phrase, you're like, I want to see robots.
Oh, right. It's like generating, not analyzing.
Post-apocalyptic world. Yeah.
Her stuff's image processing.
Yeah. So I've played around with a couple of them, but I haven't played around in a while. I have played around with the Chat GPT, and that's kind of, actually I've been using that to help me with my writing. So that's okay, so I don't know.
Oh, that background looks awesome.
Okay. Okay, so you guys can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so this is I talked about artificial neural nets. Markov brain is a kind of cognitive architecture that I work with the most. And basically, there's a set of inputs that go into the brain. Then there are these logical operators, and then there are outputs. And in fact, this is kind of a general form for most evolvable digital architectures. There's some inputs, there's some process that's kind of thinking, and then there's outputs. And these gates, they can kind of be whatever. They could be they could be the summation threshold gates that I was talking about with the artificial neural networks. Typically for Markov brains, they're logic gates. So they do binary logic, but they could also be mathematical operators. These could be numbers. This could be a multiply, and then these could be outputs. The way we evolve these things, I guess this is worth looking at. So one of the things we can do with these things is we can, let's see, there we go. So one of the things we can do is we can add hidden nodes, and hidden nodes allow for memory. So one thing is if I have a hidden node between two gates, this allows for multi-step logic. So that allows for deeper processing.
Hang on, we lost your audio, Cliff.
Gate. There we go. Everything all right? Oh, you guys are hung.
Yeah, just you're kind of going in and out just a little bit, but
are you guys back?
Yeah, I think we can hear you okay. He might be refreshing. Cliff, can you hear us?
Not me.
Yeah, I think he's just refreshing.
Yeah.
We'll give him a sec.
Well, while we're waiting for him, there was a starred comment that I'll share really quickly. It was from Creo Debunk. He said, I think AI system is in any program. I think AI system in any program is what can
learn in any way during
its work. I'm sorry, it's just a little awkward. I'm trying. It's hard for me to read if it's not in the way that my brain thinks it should be.
Yeah, I think it's just like a minimal definition of artificial intelligence.
Right. And that the simplest example is dynamic programming. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'll let Cliff answer that one too. But I'm fine with that as like a minimal. Like a minimal facts. It's like a minimal facts of artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's weird for us because we're normally out here doing the counter apologetics thing. So it's nice to actually be invited to talk about our science. All right, Cliff, sounds like you're back.
I am. I'm gonna make sure that my audio is. Okay, good. My audio seems to be.
You're actually coming back a whole lot better.
Yeah, sounds
okay. Good. I shut down a bunch of stuff, including this, as it is.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. So I will. Let me go back to sharing my screen.
Somebody asked, why does it have 3 outputs? It's arbitrary.
Yeah, it depends on the task. So in this particular, in the particular case that I'm showing, let's see. I make that happen. Uh-oh. Come on. How do I make that share?
Let's see.
Should be there. It is.
There we go. Okay. You guys do it. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, in this particular case, I'm controlling a virtual robot, and the first output is left, the second output is right. If both outputs are on, then it moves forward, and the third output is an eat output. So just as an example of how these things might be set up. And then the way that these things are built is sort of interesting. So we actually do an indirect encoding. We have a genome, which is basically a mess of numbers. And am I crashing? Really? No? Okay. I'm back. I'm here. very iffy. What we do to produce a brain is, I'm just going to look at a section of this. We basically scan through these numbers, and anytime I see, in this case, a 42, 5, 2, 12, this is I'm going to build a gate. And then I read a bunch of values from the brain, and it's these values, these yellow and green and red values. And these, I'm not going to go into the details, but gives me the information I need to build a gate. And then to evolve, this should look familiar to anyone who does evolution. You create an initial population, you evaluate the population in the world, use the scores to select parents, and then you generate a new population and apply mutations. And the mutations are, it's basically this, right? The genome gets encoded in the brain is used to evaluate the agent in the world, and then we use the scores to pick which genomes are going to be produced and mutate them.
Yeah. So for those who follow at home, that's basically the. Cliff, I was just going to say that genome, those numbers, right? So that's our A, T, C, and G, right? In this case, it's a number between 0 and 256. Exactly. And then there's just a particular identity that's usually rent as the start codon. That's where we start reading a genome, or in this case, a start for the brain. And then he'll allocate that, and so that mutates. And so it's very much we say natural selection in an artificial environment. And then you could also do insertions and deletions and all of this stuff. So we have the same sort of mutations. But that's literally what a genome looks like, just a bunch of numbers. It's pretty cool. Oh, there you go. There's a type of mutations.
Yeah, and I have different kinds of brains that I can work with. So here's an example of, this is sort of the generic model of a brain. We were talking about Markov brains with these gates. This is what a neural net looks like. This is a single layer, but you could have all layers. And then this is another one, a Cartesian genetic program is basically this grid of mathematical operators. But again, they all have inputs and hidden and outputs, right? So they all use sort of the same model at high level. And yeah, so one of the papers that I've done recently is trying to understand how these, so in the case of recurrent neural nets, Cartesian genetic programs, and Markov brains, I'm trying to understand how these things relate to each other. They're all just computer code. And so they're all Turing complete, which means that they can solve any problems. But Markov brains will outperform CGP on certain tasks. CGP will outperform Markov brains on certain tasks. And so I was curious as to, can we isolate the why specifically? And so I started creating hybrids. So I made Markov brains that kind of look more like CGP. I made CGPs that look more like RNNs, and then try to figure out what are the individual features that can be responsible for differences in behavior. So that's like one of the angles of my research.
So
but these things, the problems themselves. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, I was just going to say that the kinds of tasks that I'm performing are really simple tasks. They're really like, I mean, they're trivial tasks. But it's because I'm not really sort of at the cutting edge of trying to make general purpose intelligence. I'm trying to understand how evolution works at like the very basic level.
Well, you just answered the question I was going to ask. So yeah, I'm really glad that I had you continue on. Creo Debunk says, I think what he's saying is or does the structure also evolve? But I'm not sure if I am interpreting that correctly. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Or is the structure also evolved? Maybe.
So it depends. So in a recurrent neural net, the way that we use them typically, they're fully connected, and all that we're evolving is the weight on the connections. So it's like you can imagine that there's a bunch of wires, and what we're doing is evolving kind of the thickness of the wires within the model. In the case of Markov brains, we can a mutation could create a new start codon, and that would result in a new gate. And the way that the gate is connected can change. So in that case, the structure can change. I have another kind of brain I pulled up because it's kind of a thing. I pulled up a figure. Here it is. So this wacky thing.
Cliff, I think we're still seeing the old screen.
This is called a wire brain.
There it is. It's not called the block brain.
Are you seeing it?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
There's a bit of a delay. So, what a wire brain is basically somebody made a cellular. So a cellular automata. You probably heard of Game of Life. Cellular automata is basically take a piece of graph paper, and you make some of the squares in the graph paper black, and the other ones are white. And then there's a rule, and the rule for Game of Life says if a cell is white, it will remain white unless something like 2 or 3 of its neighbors are currently black, at which point it'll turn black. And if more than 3 of its neighbors are black, then it turns white, right? And so like the idea is if you have a couple of neighbors, then they'll like produce an offspring in your location. If you have too many neighbors, it's overcrowding, and so you die. And so somebody made a different kind of cellular automata called wire world, and wire world basically said there are 2 kinds of cells. There's wire and there's empty, and then you can introduce charge. And the way that the cellular automata works is if a cell is next to a charged cell, it becomes charged. If a cell is charged, it goes into decay. Decay, and then if it's in decay, it goes back to being wire. And what it means is that if you have a line of wire and you impart charge on one side, the charge will travel down the wire because it'll be a charge followed by decay, and that'll just move down the wire. So I said, well, that seems evolvable. So I'll just take the genome and I'll convert it into a cube where each cell is either wire or empty. And then I'll put some probes for my inputs, which will impart charge. And I'll have some probes on the other side, which are the outputs. And I'll read if the charge reaches the outputs. And if it does, the output is on. And if it doesn't, it's off. And wire brain. So here, red indicates charge, yellow indicates decay. And this thing does computation. It did basic like harvesting tasks, like a Roomba, navigating around.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the Roomba.
So this is a crazy. It does not evolve very well. It was just a proof of concept. Like, well, it was kind of a weekend project. Like, will it work? And lo and behold, it. So this is probably the wackiest kind of brain that I built.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that this touches on with counter apologetics, right, is that we're constantly talking about fitness, right? And you often hear a sort of layman's understanding. You often hear people say stuff like, "If we came from apes, why are there still apes?" Right? Now, there's a very basic level at which that's just like a fundamentally silly thing to say, like sort of like if we came from England, why there's still English people. But there's a way in which it reflects sort of a misunderstanding about evolution that we can be more charitable to, right? And that's the idea that fitness improves, and so we should be some high fitness thing, right? We're like the pinnacle of fitness, and if we've reached the pinnacle of intelligence, then how have we not outcompeted and gotten rid of everything else? And what Cliff's work, like so much fundamental evolutionary theory represents, is that it's all environmental dependent, right? And so one of the ways that this speaks to that is and he could probably go back to the part where he's showing you the different types of brain structures, is when you ask, what type of genetic architecture is best, it depends on the task. And that depends on the environment that it's in. And that really can help us think about fitness overall a little bit better. I always say, if you think you're, the most highly evolved thing, go tell it to a dolphin, but tell it to the dolphin underwater. Right? Right? And so we're not so much bones and stones people. Like, we love to think of evolution solving problems, not so much as trying to recapitulate the history of life. But one of the things that's really exciting is if you were going to say evolve a Roomba versus evolve, a self-driving car, or evolving a constitution, right? You might want to use very different types of genetic architecture to do so. And so what the work Cliff does is that's super cool is not just plugging and playing all these different type of architectures, but then actually going and saying, what is it about them that actually makes them better than this or that task? So it's very, I don't know, it's very, I don't know what the right word is, where you're like breaking something down to the core of it. You're asking, the most simple questions you can possibly ask about it. But I think it really does inform how we think about fitness, especially how we think of the fitness of brains and intelligence, because we really do have misconceptions about sort of generalized intelligence. And I think this work really helps you see how domain-specific cognition is.
Absolutely. I think that's a great
Go ahead, Cliff.
There's something that struck me. I came to this work maybe 6 years ago. I moved to, I kind of did my other life, and then I moved to Michigan about 9 years ago. And when I got here, I started basically crashing lab meetings at Michigan State. And then somebody suggested a model, and I went home that weekend and I wrote it, and I came in, and then I had results, and I was just jazzed that I got something to run. And they were actually really interested in the result that I had gotten. And that person ended up hiring me. As soon as they got their assistant professorship, they hired me.
The conversations were literally like, Cliff, if you're going to be here every day, please let us pay you and get you some benefits.
So I was staff for 2 years, and I was doing research. And then I started going to conferences. And what would happen is they would try to introduce me as Dr. Bohm, and I would have to get up and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, my degree is just BS." And that joke, like after 2 years, that was old. And I said, "Well, maybe if I'm going to present at conferences, I should just get the PhD already." With kind of the realization that if I get it, everyone will assume I've had it forever, right? No one's going to assume.
Yes, it's so true.
So I was like, yeah, okay, fine, I can do that. So, that's kind of how I didn't mean, it was not my plan to do this. It was just kind of happened. I didn't fight it. But, yeah, it's, was like, what I was going to say, what struck me. So what I'm trying to say is I haven't been here this long. Now I have been friends with Charles Lafria. He's the guy who got me to move to Michigan. He's a professor at MSU. We went to college together, and he does all digital evolution stuff. That's shtick, has been for the last 20, 30 years. So basically, the thing that struck me is how much evolution is not going to find a clean solution. How unlikely it is that the solution that evolution finds will be a clean solution, will be a simple solution, right? People say like the simplicity is a hallmark of design. Like it's incredibly efficient. It's not simple. When you look at evolved structures, they're frighteningly complex. They're I took a class on, and at one point I was talking with a professor, and it comes out that there are different neurotransmitters, and the way that the brain develops is the genetics loosely define basing program. This is as I understand it, so if I'm totally wrong, I'm sorry. I have sort of a layman's understanding about neurobiology, but the genomics defines a training program, which is should kind of get placed, and they should act in certain ways. And so it develops neurons that can help train other neurons, but it doesn't specify the details. So, people can end up, or I don't know, people, but organisms can end up using different neurotransmitters to create the same functional circuit within their nervous system. So like they will use a different chemical signaling system. But as long as the neuron performs the task it's supposed to perform, great, no problem. And when I heard that, I said, well, this is hopeless. How do you ever, right? It's bad enough that you can't. Now there are certain neurons, like there's a very well studied neuron, I think it's in stingrays, that's a part of the reflex, and you can find it. You could dissect them, and it's there. It's really big. It runs the whole length of the body. But in terms of like brains, there's no like neuron that you could go cut a brain open and like find that neuron in that location. It's just a big mess, and the process includes altering structure. And it's just like, and so if you think like the genes define a developmental process that builds a brain which has very precise structure, but not precisely specified. So it's not like a blueprint where it says put the rivets here, here, and here. It just says kind of make a building. And then we all kind of end up with, buildings that keep the rain out. But we get there in different ways. And it's mind-boggling when you think about it. You're just like, oh, how much time needed to pass for the right mutations to accumulate so that this thing actually happens. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And this is
one of the things that's been it's just final thought. One of the things that's been interesting in one of the other, I said I did some work using information theory to quantify brains. And one of the things we see is that it is, even when you try to evolve to solve relatively simple tasks, you end up getting unnecessary complexity. In fact, you even get encryption. The brains will encrypt data internally, even though they don't need to. And in some cases, it's even, it has a cost. They end up making structures that are more complex, which means that they're less mutationally robust. But since that's the solution that they found first, and it generated fitness, they can't undo it. They're kind of stuck in that. And understanding that, like, when a mutation occurs, if it gives you a benefit, even if it's not optimal, you can get stuck with it. And that's evolution. I was like, oh, okay, that's just gross.
So, Cliff, what you just touched on probably would be a good thing to show them the leading edge stuff you're dealing with. I don't know if that's the kitchen sink project. I'm not calling it the right thing. It's the
free for all stuff, or
free for all. Yes,
the free for all stuff is the
yes,
other.
Because free for all will show them getting stuck. But the one thing I was going to mention is somebody in the chat said that evolution is about making babies, and I think that's the knife's edge for us, right?
Yeah.
Is that somehow it's doing this thing where, frogs are these things, they're really green and they're really great at jumping from lily pad to lily pad and camouflaging themselves when they need to, and they have this poisonous skin coating. But none of that is the input that the designer is looking for, right? Frogs are just trying to make more frogs. And so so that's one really weird implication of all this, is that somehow, because you would think, like, just philosophically, right? All right, you put a bunch of really intelligent designers in a room and they get to design a task. They don't have to worry about reproduction. They don't have to worry about none of that stuff. All they get to do is just design something to solve the problem. And then you go in this other area and you go, yeah, you guys don't even focus on designing the problem. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Just make more copies of yourself. Whoever makes the most copies wins. And somehow that ends up with a better solution so many times. That is mind-boggling to us, and it's really fascinating. And the other consequence of that is our business is about looking for rare stuff. Right? So sometimes we get these really unique, neat studies where we get to say, I create this environment for the organisms and I create that environment for the organisms. I run 100 populations in each. There's some really huge statistical significant difference. I can report that, and they'll give me money. Never works that way, but in theory it could. But what also happens is, like in a lot of our stuff, is you're looking for something rare. Maybe it only solved it once in this particular way, out of hundreds of runs, and that's how evolution is. It doesn't have to be a dominant solution or one that it comes up readily. It could just be a really rare thing. And so that's another interesting consequence of this, is that, Cliff, and I'm sitting there going, Cliff, do I really have to look through every single replicate individually? He's like, if you want to find the rare thing that happened, then absolutely, it's absolutely what you have to do. But yeah, it's we're hunting for, diamonds in the rough or needles in the haystack a lot of times because of it. Yeah.
I think that can't be that particular point can't be overstated. There's been certain creationists who have had a problem with the Lenski lines, the long-term evolution experiment that Jay worked on.
I worked on for grad school. And
Rich Lenski at Michigan State. And, look, within those lines, we've seen the evolution of new function. Like the thing that they say can't happen, a mutation occurred and it actually made the thing better. And so first of all, and they're like, oh, no, but that was just loss of function that allowed it to do a thing. You're like, no, but that's what we expect. That's no, just fully, it was not loss of function. And even if it was, that's how evolution works. It's a change. It doesn't matter gain, loss. It's a change that makes you better in your environment. But the crazy thing is they're running this thing in little petri dishes or little flasks. Actually, they're flasks, right? I have never actually even toured that lab.
Yeah, they're little flasks. They're flasks.
They're flasks with a few liters.
Yeah.
How many liters in the flask?
100 mils, so a tenth.
100 mils.
Yeah.
A tenth. Okay. And there's like 12 lines or something?
12 lines. There it is. Boom.
So you basically have been looking at like a liter.
It is the most uncharismatic looking experiment. It's literally just the little flask.
But like the oceans of the earth are like 100 billion gallons.
Yeah, no, this
like
is
100
incredible.
billion liters.
Yeah.
And so like the fact that over the course of 30 years, within 1 liter of volume, they've actually seen something significant.
Right. A speciation event,
yeah.
essentially.
A speciation event, essentially, yeah. But like, wait a minute. But the world has like billions upon billions of gallons of water. Like all the pond, like just a pond.
Yeah.
In like a local park is like, 10,000 times that, right? And then we got the oceans, and then and it's just like, yeah, no.
So this is what he's getting at here is we like to think that evolution is amazing. It's mind blowing, right? Look at the trees, right? But if you think about it, right, given the scale of the planet, given billions of years, given the exponential growth of populations unchecked, right? It actually is almost mundane that you would see this type of evolution, because the opportunity has been there. And so we can't wrap our heads around that type of time scale, but just seeing it, if it can happen in 30 years in these 12 little flasks, of course you can get macro evolution given billions of years in the oceans of the earth. So
right. I think you hit on the biggest thing that we have. What we were talking about earlier with the pushback for science and that sort of thing, is that it's very difficult for people who are not like just excited by this topic to grasp the length of time that it takes for a small change. And we're then talking to them about these large changes, like what you've heard from some of them. How did a frog become a human? How do you get a dog to become a giraffe or something like that?
You don't. Don't get a dog to become a giraffe.
But I can understand in a sense why it just doesn't make sense to them, because they're not seeing it's very difficult to wrap your,
it's not intuitive.
your head
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
that.
I agree. I agree with that, but I don't think that anybody starts out going, yeah, but how did a dog become a giraffe?
Right.
Right. So that was Ken Hovind or his ilk, right? Who basically put that thought in someone's head, right? And the thing is like once you have that meme, then you're like, oh, well, now explain me out of this. And you're like, oh, okay, no, it's common ancestor. You know, I was just reading something today where somebody said, some study showed that mice and humans are related, but humans didn't come from mice. How do you explain that? And the person's like, oh, it's common ancestor. It's, oh, come on, people. Like, oh.
So, I mean, this gets at a couple things I was going to ask you about, Sonny, is what do you think we could do to meet people better? Because I got to be honest, I don't feel like it works. And I'm going to go ahead and say maybe a lot of that's us. Like, we could just do better. So, for instance, like when I try to have conversations with people who don't accept evolution or something, I find that we're starting so far apart that it ends up being like clips. Like we're so exasperated before we get anywhere, and I'm realizing that's really not helpful. That there's got to be some sort of way to sit down with a person and more or less get them to understand. I don't have an agenda here. We're just. But I think. How long have you been doing this out here on Skeptic Haven?
So Skeptic Haven, let's see, how long, Wes, has been around now? We've hit a year yet. Wes and I worked on another show before this.
Okay.
And when that show ended, we came over here and kind of created this. So it's been at least maybe 2 years, I think.
Okay.
I have to ask Wes to be on the safe side for that.
What do you think?
At least.
What would you say sets out your more productive conversations? Like when you go, that went well, you know? Like what if you get to give the scientist advice? Like how could we be doing better?
Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. You know, if I knew the answer, I'd probably be wealthy.
Sure. Is some of it the jargon, you think?
I think that jargon does have a lot to do with it, but I also agree with what Cliff said, that a lot of times we get hit with so much that it's hard to even start because you're just like, oh my God, you're so frustrated. I think the first step is, and I've seen this with some of the other content creators, is that they keep the person on one topic. They will, if you give them an opportunity to just blurt out a whole bunch of things, it's like one thing on top of another on top of another. And by the time that you get a chance to talk, your brain is like fried already because they've already taken you around the world and, you know, and through the bushes and everything else. And, you know, you don't even have a chance to begin. And that's what some people want to do is kind of railroad you and not give you a chance. And it's to keep in mind that it's not so much the person that you're talking to, say on YouTube, it's the viewers that really are going to be impacted. And so I think some of the best ways that I've seen is when someone stops and says, wait a minute, I hate to interrupt you, but before we continue, let's talk about this and let's try to define this. What do you mean by this? And that's some of the best ones that I've seen is when people are talking, get them to define what they're asking you. What do you mean by this? And how do you think that this works? And then come from there, because that's how you find out where they are at in order to meet them at that place. So allow them, and also by doing that, you're treating them as an adult, as a sentient being, and you're getting from them. Before I can answer, I need to know what you mean and what do you know about this one thing. So I know you have a whole bunch to talk about, and I want to get there. But for right now, let's focus on the first thing that they said.
That's a good idea.
Be able to have common terminology. You have to define it before you can really know where to go from there.
My conversations do tend to go all over the place because I haven't been good about that. The other thing I was going to ask, and maybe Cliff you might speak to this too. Do you think some of this well poisoning helps in the sense that it gets people on these topics or it gets them in the classroom? And what I mean by that is, so if I'm teaching an evolution class in college, a high-level seminar or something like that, most of my students don't want to be there because they're med students and they just want to go to medical school and ball out. Now, somebody along the way has told them they've got to take the seminar, so they take it. But I feel like the only students that are motivated to study evolution, right, are usually the sort of rare student with general biology interest, right? The student who's not going to be a medical school student, but they want to be a biologist, right? Those students are rare, but we get them. And then sometimes it's the kid with the creationist ideas, because that at least brings them into the classroom with some sort of interest. And so I haven't decided yet, because I always feel like if it wasn't for their desire to attack evolution, they wouldn't even be sitting here in the first place. So I never know.
Yeah, I just have to ask you a quick question.
That's a dangerous game you're playing.
Yeah, it is. But you said that you have a lot of students who come in who really want to be in med school. They want to kind of bypass that and go into med school.
100%.
But how can they even begin to go into med school if they don't really understand evolution? You have to understand that to even move on. It's like you can't go into a higher level of math if you don't know your
yeah. You can't be a CPA if you don't know accounting. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think what it is most of them they know a bit about evolution, so they certainly understand mutations and genes and things like that. And in our class, they're really getting hit hardcore with evolutionary theory, and so for most of them, that just hasn't been like a passion of theirs, and sort of the way we're giving it to them as the undergirding of all biology and really making them think through it mechanistically. It's just a level of thought that they haven't put into it. So they don't come in not accepting evolution or anything like, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Part of the problem is they accept it. They're not creationist, they get it. Mutations cause diseases, and so they're kind of checked out in that regard. And then we've got to bring them back into like, no, this is the coolest theory in the history of biology, and we've got to kind of get them feeling the magic a little bit. But then we do have students who come in and they don't seem too strong on it, but they'll mention that they're in church groups and stuff like that, and you can tell they're just a little bit wide-eyed about it. But normally, by the time they go through it, they're usually fine, right? Because they're there to learn, right? They're usually there to learn, and I feel like their instruction is so well that they realize that they're not having the wool pull over their eyes, and that we're really teaching them what they should learn. But it's interesting. To be honest, a lot of our students get really motivated, and that's a common thing they write about, is that they'll write about creationism versus evolution or science versus pseudoscience. And sometimes it's because over the course of the semester they've been getting in these conversations with their friends, with their families, in their churches, and believe it or not, they come out wanting to write their term papers about it. So we're always excited when that happens.
Oh, that's awesome. I will tell you, just as you were talking, I was thinking one of the best ways that I think any presenter, whether it's an instructor or a lecturer or whatever, is making it relevant to them, but also showing them your own exuberance.
Sure, yeah.
Because, I've been in some classes that I wanted to take, I was excited to take, and then the instructor is dry as all, get out of it. And it's like, oh my God, I really wanted this class, but I cannot wait to get out of it. And I think that's true for and I just think that's human nature. I think you can reach so many more people just by showing your own exuberance.
It was a big problem with the way we were training faculty, right? Publish or perish meant that, faculty were rewarded for their research and not so much their teaching. And so their teaching was kind of secondary. And, a disproportionate amount of us went to school with professors that didn't want to be there. They wanted to be in their labs or doing research. And I think now it's still that way, but they're telling us we have to be good instructors as well. So they're at least raising the bar on the edge. And like, I'm in a training program that's really all about that. Is they really want to get us out there. And it's even why I'm teaching at a community college, because they think it's important that we get exposed to different types of institutions and different types of academic backgrounds for our students, so that we're not all used to, kind of spoiled at certain institutions, right? Your students always come with a certain level of preparation, and that's not realistic. So I'm excited about it, but I definitely can relate. It's a huge problem, and I also feel like it puts people out of careers, right? So I don't like weed out classes, for instance, because what happens is you have a student who wants to be a nurse. Like, she wants to care for people, she wants to help people, and then she has to take all these weed out classes, all these upper level chem courses, and all this stuff that doesn't have anything to do with it. And so then we end up with nurses who test well rather than nurses who treat well. And that bothers me,
That's a great point. You also have instructors, you said, that don't really want to be there. I wanted to go into neuropsychology. I really, really thought that would be, and I really wish I had. I really wish I hadn't allowed an instructor to deter me from that. Yeah. Although I love what I do now, but this, it was an advanced anatomy class, and the instructor was really ticked off that he wasn't at Johns Hopkins.
Wow.
And he told everybody that he should have been at Johns Hopkins. He had this inflated ego.
And that makes you feel like being there isn't worth his time or something. It's awful.
That's exactly right. He made it very difficult for everybody, because if he was going to have to be there doing something he didn't like, he was just going to make everybody's life miserable. And I ended up not going down the route. So people,
right.
Institutions need to be aware. It's not just, well, we also want you guys to be teachers. They have to get the right people in that position, because they can really screw it up if they don't have a good instructor.
Yeah, that puts pressure on people like me and Cliff. See, Cliff, that one bad professor. We got to try not to be that one bad professor.
No, I mean, this is a whole thing. All I'm going to say on this is I think that there is a limit to have some level of expectation. There's a concern that I have that there are certain, there's an argument about using calculators too early. And the argument basically says, like, it's not important that you memorize the multiplication tables, but it is important that you exercise the part of your brain that memorizes things. Mm. And that may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm not a neuropsychologist. Sure. I don't know. But if that's the case, then right, like attention span, being able to, I was reading an article about people's ability to focus, even like academics, the ability to sit down and focus and read a paper has gone from like 2 hours where you could just sit and focus on reading a paper for 2 hours before you have to take a break to like most people an hour or 40 minutes before they're just like, I literally can't process this anymore. I got to go, I got to take a 5-minute break. And your ability therefore to do the work is reduced. And it's because we've got instant feedback machines that are designed to entertain us. So put that on one side is like, I think sometimes a class is going to be hard, and it should be. Oh yeah, right? Your brain should be hard to do
absolutely.
It. On the other, I think that the teaching is kind of the funny. So one of my hobbies is blacksmithing, and I teach blacksmithing, and so I actually teach blacksmithing a lot more than sciencey stuff. Most is I do research, and then I go teach blacksmithing on the weekends, and it's really interesting to try to get into the head of the students and say to them what they need to hear. Sometimes that's like leaving them alone. Sometimes you just gotta like let them make mistakes for a while, because like you just told them a thing, and like I think they'll figure it out if I leave them alone, right, and let them suffer. Sometimes you go, oh no, I gotta step in right now. This is
Yeah, Cliff, can you close your door? Just there's a lot of background noise.
I had a student who
Got a lot of people over.
Well, it might have been mine.
It might have been yours. Sorry. Okay,
yeah,
I wasn't sure.
Might have been mine.
I wasn't sure. It sounded like Jory was having a party over there.
okay. I was going to say, it's not me. There's nobody else here.
Mine.
It was
no worries.
It's the cat. I think that like it's difficult because you can conflate like a difficult class with a bad instructor.
Yes, absolutely.
And like I'm a little bit hesitant to like to gloss over that point because I think it's important.
Yeah.
But,
our class is hard. I'd actually admit that to people that our class is like the hardest class our students have had all 4 years in school, right? But I'm trying to make sure it's the class that's hard, not me, right? Like, yeah, but that's a really good point. Cliff, you mentioned it, and now you got to show people some blacksmithing because that's some real crazy stuff you got going on there. I'm always I gotta advertise, man. You gotta promote my guys.
Do I?
Cliff is a man of the arts and sciences.
Man. All right.
He's also worked on like Shrek and
Oh my gosh.
Ice Age. Cliff, what other famous movies have you worked on?
No way.
Did you work on Finding Nemo?
I worked on the Ice Age movies. I worked on robots. I didn't work on Finding Nemo. I worked on the worst Shrek. I worked on Shrek the Third. I was in computer animation for about 15 years out of college.
That's awesome.
And then I had a small company. I made card games. If anyone's ever heard of Red Dragon Inn, that was me. That's my fault. And then so that was sort of career number 2 was making games.
Yep.
And I did that for like 10 years. That kind of overlapped. And now I'm an academic. So.
Real Renaissance man.
That's fantastic. That's so fantastic. Oh my gosh. I now have like a million other questions.
We'll come back.
Get us into like a whole bunch of other shows.
Oh, we'd love to come back. I think
absolutely. I would love for you guys to come back. We've actually gone over.
Yeah, can Cliff show you some flowers and then we'll call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And while he's looking that up, I want to let everyone know that we are in the process of moving my show from Mondays to Fridays. It makes a little bit more sense with some of the other content creators that are out there so that people don't have to pick and choose as much as they have on Mondays. And so just be aware, I have a show this Friday. I was looking on the schedule. I don't have a show on the 16th. That's Martin Luther King Day. We're trying to get one for the Friday, the 20th. I do have my last Monday show is on the 23rd. And because that one had already been set, and that one is it's astronomy, has a panel with Kyle Ethan and Secular Rarity. So y'all need to check that out. And then after that, I will have all Friday shows. So be sure and follow me from Mondays to Fridays.
Skeptic Haven said, ask Cliff, can we chat about AI concepts? So you can always email Cliff. And we host, I'm on Pocket Locker 86. So if you subscribe, we host a show every Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Where we work on these experiments. Cliff is my programming mentor, and so we're actually currently working on our experiments. Our current experiments actually related to sexual selection. So we take these organisms and we can actually make them mate and do all sorts of weird mating rituals. And I'm actually getting into coercion, right? Because coercion is a sort of nastier aspect of mating, but when computers are doing the coercion, nobody gets harmed. So we're able to sort of study it as an evolutionary phenomenon without harming any ducks or birds. So,
That's awesome.
Cliff, you got some metal work to show us?
It's a weird kink he's got, but.
Look at that.
It's a weird kink he's got, but at least we're only harming digital art. So some roses. And here's here's
Look at that
Oh
thing.
my
This is
gosh.
a bigger piece that I did earlier in the year.
Yeah, I mean, he's
So
not.
this
He's
is
not in
this thing's
there.
about 8 feet high.
He's not in there hammering
Wow.
away, making
This
some
one was
rods.
this one was actually the shirt I'm wearing is from that, because that was Scrapfest is a competition they do in mid-Michigan every year where they have artists go in a junkyard for an hour and get you get scrap metal from this junkyard. You get up to 500 pounds of steel, and then you have a month to turn it into art. So that was my entry this year for Scrapfest.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
That is absolutely amazing. Do you take a lot of recycled stuff, like one person's trash is another man's treasure type things?
I mean, I do. You know, I've been doing. I'm working on a commission right now, actually, which is really rare for me because usually I just kind of make very few pieces a year. I mostly teach, but I'll use whatever I can find. You know, if I can find some material I can recycle, I'm going to use that because it's cheap.
Yeah.
You know, I used to make a lot of knives, and I would use leaf springs. So you get old leaf springs out of old cars, cut those up, and make them into knives. It's good steel.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. We could go on to so many different shows. You know, we just need to have you guys on a whole lot more.
Yeah, can Wes?
Awesome.
Will Wes be able to schedule us, or you still scheduling Wes? So
Absolutely, he can.
Awesome.
So Wes, you got work to do, buddy. We're going to get them on for more shows.
appreciate it.
This
This
is
was a
great.
lot of fun. Again, I'm at Pocket Locker 86. Please check me out, and thank you all so much, and thanks to the chat for being active. Really appreciate all the great comments.
And I just want to thank both of you guys for coming on. Cliff, do you want to say anything? Dr. J already did. I wonder if you had any final.
No, I have a YouTube channel, and there's like 5 videos on it, but mostly they're really boring research things. I think it's actually under my name. I think it's under Clifford Bohm. And I got a bunch of stuff on if you go to Google Scholar, you can look up my papers. But again, you know, they're pretty esoteric. So
I like that stuff. I think this particular viewership is into that stuff. I think we like all the geeky stuff. So
yeah, and I mean, if you're interested, also a conversation on philosophy, and we can explore my mantra, which is that metaphysics is garbage. And you know,
that's awesome. Well, for everyone who is watching, if you like this type of content, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, all those good things. Another way that you can support us is joining our Patreon, and you get special perks for that, like getting a link, and you could have come on and asked Dr. J and Cliff whatever you wanted to ask them, just like I'm on here doing. I want to thank our current patrons: Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Shannon Gray, Michael Weisman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Aaron Colson, Phil Calderon, Deborah Grace, and me. I want to thank our producers, Wes, Phil, and Kat, and the booking team, Wes, Raymond, Ellie, and Correa. Remember, we have other shows too: Secular Soapbox, Women Atheist Unload. I also guest host on that sometimes. Global Atheist, and The Bible Says What. So check all of those out. Those are great. And in the meantime, I'll see you again on Friday. Don't forget. And be sure to always think critically. Good night, everybody.
All right, thanks so much. That was
yeah,
fun.
thank you. That was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Oh,
Thank you
that's-
for staying longer too.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just
Yeah, no
I'm just
worries.
waiting on stuff
No
to
worries.
finish running. So I'm still doing research. Yeah, hopefully that wasn't too all over the place.
I think it was great. I had so much fun. I just sat here like, oh my gosh, I could listen to them forever.
Say, Cliff,
Yep.
can I get your email or
Oh, sure.
contact
It's
info, Facebook or Twitter?
yeah. Email is best.
Okay,
I
private
can
chat.
put it- Yeah, I was just gonna
You
say.
can throw it in.
And thanks for saying we sounded prepared. We actually tried, right, Cliff? We sat down a couple times and made sure we were on the same page about topics and stuff. So, yeah, we wanted to make sure you guys got a good interview out of us. So, thanks.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. It was. I love it. Love it. Love it.
On the philosophy thing, I totally agree. Metaphysics is bullshit.
Awesome.
I mean, it was basically I think the main reason why I came to that is I was watching a lot of Darth Dawkins debates, going, how is he like? He's completely. It's everything he's saying is BS, but his rhetoric is phenomenal. He railroads people, and I was like, what is he doing? And I'm like, oh, he's using metaphysics as fact. It's like one of his. I mean, he keeps switching between things, but one of his tricks is he uses metaphysics as fact, and it's like, oh my God, yeah, you can argue anything if
you can argue anything. There you go.
It's ridiculous. So, no, that's where I'd like to push that idea. It was actually I was talking to Jay at one point, and he was like, yeah, what would your tagline on a YouTube channel? Metaphysics is garbage. He's like, that's perfect. I gotta get it out there.
You do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, maybe we'll do one on metaphysics and science at some point. That'd be great.
That would be awesome. And honestly, if anytime that you guys want to come on and you have a specific topic that you want to talk about, all you got to do is let us know, and
okay.
Yeah, we'll get you on. Not a problem.
Appreciate that. Thanks again, Cliff. I'll see you on Wednesday. Cliff.
Okay, I'm.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm checking my I am just checking my YouTube. I think I'm just me on YouTube.
Okay. I'll look it up here in a minute.
My videos. Let's see.
All right, I'm gonna dip out, Cliff.
Yeah,
I'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks so much, Sonny.
All right, bye.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jay.
Yes.
See you later,
I'll
Wes.
have to do so.
All right, that was super fun. Great. All right, gang. That was fun. Let me see. I guess what I'll do is we'll head to the cafe real quick. I'm in the cafe. So I'll stay in the cafe for a little bit. See if anybody wants to call in and chat. Yeah, we'll do that for a little bit. All right, I'm in here. Let me see. 3434. Turn that on. That was fun. Oh yeah, I normally stream when I do my live appearances. Makes it easier. Update. This version of Gather is no longer supported. Yeah, but y'all trash with the download, with the updates. Y'all trash with the updates. Y'all trash with the updates, Gather. All right, y'all, let's put something on. Let's see what's going on. Monday's it's been a slow-ass day. I ain't even gonna lie to you. It's not a lot going on because last week was so chaotic. All right. I got something for you. I got something bonus material, bonus show after party ready for you. Windows protected your PC. Run it. Run anyway. What are you talking about? All right, y'all. Now look, check it out, man. Where is Actually, let me go ahead and get y'all this link pinned so people could call in if y'all want to call in, man. All right, if I want to call in, y'all could call in. Where's my thingy? All right, so I'm gonna pop open another one. I'm about to hit y'all with a link. All right, and then I'm gonna put a link. That way people could call in. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. All right, we're gonna have some fun. Boom. In the message. All right, Myron Bot. Join me, Myron Bot. All right, y'all, we're going over to the cafe. Y'all still at the ranch. Come to the cafe. All right. All right, cafe. Boom. All right. Now we should be good to go. Myron Bot, 5-6, voice meter, input. That's good. Nope. Myron Bot. Myron Bot, what are you doing? What are you doing, Myron Bot? All right, stay there. All right, gang, we're good to go. All right, so look, tell your homeboys to come holla at me. A lot of people are still in the ranch. That's normally the right place to be, but I don't want to deal with passwords today. So, all right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching the show on Skeptic Haven. Giving a couple minutes for people to get over here. We'll do a little after party call in thing. I think Tux is over here. Oh Lord, man, I could show you this thing. It's having a bit of a struggle over here. All right. All right. All right, let's put on some music. Got a lot of time living in the moment, like, Gather had me update on the other machine, and now it's like not working. Oh my goodness. All right, there we go. All right, now there's some screens. All right. Nice. All right. Now we're back. All right. And then we'll change screens. All right, that looks good. Nice. What's up, Tux? Can you hear me? Nope. Can you hear me, Tux? I think you're muted. AR, can you hear me? No, these guys can't hear me. 3, 4. 3, 4. AR, can you hear me? Oh yeah, AR can hear me.
There we go.
Oh, y'all weren't on the stage.
Yeah. There you go.
How about now?
Yeah, that's better. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going well. Thank you, AR.
Oh, yeah.
Did you catch you were over here doing the Skeptic Haven thing, huh?
I only caught the last 5-6 minutes of it.
Oh, all right. How are things going?
Yeah, things are going pretty well. The national championship game's boring, so.
Oh, I wanted to watch that. Is it? It's no good.
It's no good.
Is
TCU has nothing. There's.
Oh, really? They're just getting beat up on by Michigan? Or
no, by Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah. That game was pretty good.
But do you think that this is a big deal for those smaller conferences, right? Because it's kind of like we finally get y'all in there, and then you just get routed on.
Yeah, I don't know.
Year to year, I think they're gonna go to 8 teams or whatever soon anyway.
Like Ohio State put up a pretty good fight. I'm not sure Michigan would have matched up well against Georgia. Michigan did really well against Ohio State, but they had the most perfect quarter they have ever played, I think, in Michigan's life.
Right.
And they really made their bid bigger than it should have been, in all honesty. It was a much closer game than the score represented, in my opinion.
Sure. But
Even though I'm a Michigan fan.
What was the score of the national championship game? Like, it's not close?
Last I saw it was like 24-6, and TCU has nothing.
Just nothing.
They have nothing. So
I wanted to ask you if you'd be willing to.
Oh, it's 38-7. So
help me get in touch with Kevin.
Yeah.
Discord.
I sent him Discord invite to you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Tell me about how that conversation got started. I got to admit, I was quite impressed with that conversation, just because I felt like he's really listening, right? In like a way that we don't get with many believers. So I just wondered, what are your thoughts on that conversation? For those who don't remember, can you summarize what you were trying to tell, what you were trying to tell him, and just your reflections on that conversation?
I met Kevin about a year ago. Nitty and I met Kevin about a year ago, I'd say. I think he was in with the Bread of Life crowd before that. I would say when I first met him, he was somewhere around 40% declining in his Christianity.
Sure.
I would put him somewhere around 90 to 95% now.
Right.
He is a skeptic. I know where he's at. I have been there myself. I was there basically for 25 years at the point where he was, where, you know, when I first met him, he was a Christian. I'm going to be a Christian, but I'm fighting for some answers and I'm not getting them. And as time goes by, the more he hangs out with skeptics like Nitty and I, the more he is inclined to probably deconvert someday. But you know how Christianity works. I mean, sometimes there's the moment of the feels that, and there's the community that is very strong, the welfare systems that's very strong, and you can just dismiss some of the, you know, the cuckoo for Cocoa Puff seed faiths, and, you know, just declare them as the charlatans.
Yeah.
You know. So that conversation got started in a Discord server called Talk About Doubts. So I signed up for it. It's Jonathan McClatchy's website.
I was gonna say, I'd love to have a Discord like that.
He invites you in to talk about your doubts, and there's a chat room in which somebody had posted something about doubts, and basically their doubt was, I very rarely chime into this specific room, but I always keep an eye on it, called Struggle Bus. And it's a really good insight as to what's wrong with Christianity. You know what? I'm just gonna read whatever the latest is.
Sure.
I'm sure somebody has said, I'm struggling with this. Let's see. It's been a couple of days since I've got. Can you? Let's see. That's Eric V. I don't want to. Let's see what this guy's saying. But the whole idea of how I get morality is not. It's not from ellipsis that. But yeah, just a Bayesian. It's not likely God would do this. So on and so on. Personally, I don't think Christianity has much explanatory or predictive power, but I might be wrong, you know? And basically it's a conversation about somebody struggling with their Christianity, and it's a really good insight. Now, they're doing essentially damage control. Well, a couple of weeks ago, somebody
because Jonathan McClatchy's a Christian
apologist-ish. He's actually a professional. He has some sort of science degree.
Okay.
I'm not even sure what it is, but he has a doctorate in some sort of sciences.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I don't remember what it is, but he's kind of a armchair apologist. He's been on with Doug 2, maybe 3 times, and there's a really good clip of Doug going on somebody else's chat and having a conversation and doing the flying man to Jonathan McClatchy. And at the end of it, the very last question, you can tell John McClatchy's had enough and he's starting to turn green like he just swallowed a frog. It's pretty impressive, in my opinion. But somebody posted on the site, on the Struggle Bus, of what, what about Jesus telling his apostles, the disciples, that he was going to return in their lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And that person was struggling with it. And I said, yes, this is a big problem, in my opinion. Paul is having to manage these issues in Corinthians 15. And it kind of started a chain reaction in which this guy's just here to be a naysayer, and that this guy is going to... they read my about tab on my YouTube page because I posted my Discord YouTube link.
So they're saying
they took a screenshot of
you're
it.
just there to be a naysayer, right? Like I'm
just there to be a naysayer.
So you should be ignored in the
seeds of doubt.
This doubt chat. Okay.
And Kevin jumped in.
Hang on.
Immediately
Can I just quickly say
said,
that's super interesting because it's like they have a chat where they're literally posting their doubts, right?
Yeah.
And then someone just comes in and essentially validates those doubts. Like, yeah, there's a there, right?
Yeah.
But then you're immediately flamed. That's like, don't listen to him. He's just here to sow seeds of doubt. Bro, that's what this Discord is here for. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
So here's the actual post. Chris Willow.
Thanks, AR.
Let's see. Did I go back too far? So this is dated
Divine
I've almost found it.
coincidences.
Maybe they deleted it off. I'm not sure. Maybe not. But anyway, am I on the struggle bus? Oh, yes, here I found it. I'm a bit older, but in the same situation. I cannot really advise you since have attacks on this particular anxiety. So this person's having anxiety about it. Also coupled with the serious physical condition. But no, you're not alone. And then I experienced a couple times of the prayer in doubt. Did I go down far enough? I am having a bad night, which is sad right before Christmas. I think one of the reasons I'm reading and thinking about this, why did Jesus think he would be back during the lifetime of his disciples? I have also felt insecure about this. Is there a good answer for it?
Wow.
And so, he goes on, and my response is yes, Chris, in my opinion, this delegitimizes Jesus fully. In conjunction with 1 Corinthians 15:12 through 19, Paul is doing damage control because death is coming to this generation, and Paul's stating not all of you have died yet. Only some of you have fallen asleep. So the conversation was me pitching the ins and outs of Corinthians 15, up one side and down the other, in which the mythicist view and the Greek translation combination of the creed through Jesus' return. Jesus is expected to return in 1 Corinthians 15, 51, and 52. And in between there's also a section where he's trying to kind of rev up the troops of, hey, resurrection doesn't mean what you think it means. And I show a mythicist view of Paul doesn't even think it's a physical body resurrection. He's selling it that Adam was a physical body. Jesus is a heavenly body. And he goes back and forth. He repeats it about 4, 5, maybe even 6 times, depending on when you start and stop the counting. And that's how that conversation matured. So,
And where do you place something like that? Because what I'm picking up is, and almost kind of, I'm coming back almost to the Discord post. I think we have to step our game up, because I think some of what they're putting in that Discord sounds incredibly candid, right? And it says something to me that this is something I'm struggling with. This is something that makes me sad. I'm having a bad day because of this. This sounds like depression. I mean, I had a thing earlier, even, like, there are certain things that I think trigger my bipolar and make me feel particularly crazy. And 2 of those things is automated phone calls, right? So, like, you've got to call the insurance or the pharmacist, right? And you've got to listen to the automated thing and press 3, then press 2, then press 5, then tell them the same piece of information 3 times. I really think it's something with bipolar where that drives us crazy. I've only been able to ask a couple other bipolar people about it, but in my experience, like, we share this experience. Like, there's something about talking to a computer and repeating the same information that just triggers us. And the same thing can kind of be with forms. And I found myself today really struggling because someone wants to give me an award. Like, I won an award, but to, like, get the award, the university's got to pay me out, but now that I'm not employed at the university anymore, they need me to sign a new I-9, right? So I got to do this new I-9, which is literally like name, address, social security number, date of birth, signature, right? But I don't have a printer, right? Technically I do, but I'm not going to set up a printer for one thing. It's up in the attic somewhere, right? I don't have, like, the pay for Adobe thing, right? And so getting this thing filled out was really a struggle for me. I ended up going to some website that did it and then wouldn't let me download the filled out one without signing up for their fucking service or whatever. And like I ended up figuring it out. Like I had to make a privacy card so I could register for the premium Adobe for a day and fill it out and download but it just drove me crazy. And I found myself in the midst of this process, like almost unable to function. Like there was a time I really couldn't sit still. Like it was driving me so crazy that it was like painful to sit in this chair. I couldn't. And I was like damn near screaming. Like I was really, like if you were a fly on the wall, you would have been like, holy shit, like I need to like be there for my friend or call an ambulance or something. You'd be like, Jay is really having a hard time right this way. And you probably would not be able to understand that at the end of the day, it's really just this form. Right, you're like, Jay, your mom died. Jay, did a girl just break your heart? Like, Jay, tell me the truth. What's really going on? I can't be the form. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, trust me, it's the form. And so I'm sort of trying to relate to my own mental health struggle and realize, there are things that cause me to be able to like not function, right? That in the normal sphere of adult functioning at 36 years old, this should not be causing you this serious level of an issue, right? And I just have to realize it's managing bipolar. So eventually you get the damn thing done, you smoke a joint, you make sure you take your meds later, you order a fucking sandwich and you cope, right? but what I'm hearing with this Christianity thing is like, these people are really having psychiatric distress. And we sometimes treat it like, well, we don't agree with them or they're just not, they don't know what we know. But we lose sight of the fact that they're the victims here and that there's some real victimization happening. Like that's real distress that they're in, right? But here's the other thing. It then gets tied to these things that are so specific, right? Like there's all these huge questions, but it's like, I'm really having this angst. But then the angst is like, well, Jesus did make this one very particular prediction. Right. So what do you think it is that creates these sort of
Over here on the side.
Oh, AR's trying to get somebody else in here. They're like linchpin style arguments. You know what I mean? Where it almost seems to come down to these things that seem like they'd be too trivial for that much of your faith to hang on them. If that makes any sense.
Well, with Kevin's case, clearly he believes that there is a supernatural being, but he is slowly but surely no longer believing that the Bible came from that Jesus, that there isn't really a plan there, and it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all a pretty facade on a book that sounds like it's wise, but it's actually, when you look under the surface, it's not.
Yeah.
And once the illusion is shattered, it's hard to re-get it back, but he wants it back. And I think you've probably gone through something similar. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But you're probably hanging on, I'm guessing, I could be wrong here, but you're hanging on to your percussion gig at churches in the hopes that the illusion returns that you once had.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think there's.
You enjoy drumming. There's other motivations.
Yeah,
there too,
yeah. I've certainly, yeah, and there are times I find myself in the middle of service, like, wishing I could be having the same experience that the other people in the audience are having and not being able to conjure it. Cameron at one point said he was confused. Sorry, Cameron. I was just trying to make the point earlier that the same way for me, the things that trigger my bipolar and angst might not be obvious, right? It isn't always a blow up or death in the family. It might be to an outside observer something that just seems weird, trivial, and like an insignificant part of everyday life. Similar with Christians, or people are doubting, it isn't always this big, huge thing like, oh, I'm worried God doesn't exist, or we always talk about, fear of hell, these sort of big, obvious things, or evolution, or, something like that. It can be something very particular, like a particular failed prophecy or something Jesus said that they can't stop thinking about. Whereas a lot of us would have seen, those things are easy to write off, but it just reflects a different psychology. John's here. I don't want to ignore him. Hey, John, thanks for calling in. And what's up, man? I can't hear you right now. You might be muted.
John's not up on the stage.
Oh, he's not on the stage. Is that what's going on?
AR's been trying to
get him up here.
Get him up on the stage.
I can see him. I see what's going on. I can see him, but I can't hear him because he's not on the stage.
And I was lost because I couldn't.
No,
All I could see were, the zoom type of view.
Yeah, that's the grid view. Yeah, he'll get over here. I see. It takes a little bit of figuring out, especially if you're on he's on a phone too, so.
This way, there you go.
All right, John, now we can hear you.
You could hear me?
Yeah, thanks so much, AR.
I just want to say hi, and you guys are awesome.
Oh,
and,
appreciate you.
I was going to ask if you ever tried meditating to help with your anxiety.
I have. To be honest, I had a professor I would meditate with in college, and I found it beneficial. I liked it. I did find myself feeling a sort of religious anxiety over it, like to the point where it's like you start meditating and then you realize you should be meditating. So now you're starting to have anxiety about the fact that you're not meditating enough. But if I could setting my own angst apart, I found it to be really, centering and peaceful. And I've tried to find my own ways to be meditative. Like, I'm not always a person who finds it, sitting still in silence is always the best way. But I have my own ways of making sure I kind of shut things off and go to a meditative state. But to be honest, it's something I probably could do more, even just in a moment where I was talking about before, right? Like it would have helped for even a 30-second or minute meditation. Just go sit on the bed and meditate for a minute can kind of get you out of some of those traumatic experiences, I think.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, I always say with
try loving kindness meditation, like Chris Germer or something like that. Like, look that up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, actually, that's actually kind of a good idea to find something to guide, because that's kind of what was before, and also like it was kind of doing the Eastern thing with like the chanting and stuff like that, and I think something that's more of a mindful practice in English might be more beneficial. Where are you at on these things? Are you a believer, non-believer, former believer?
I'm an atheist. Yeah, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I actually I was trolling the guys on Gnostic Informant, trolling the Christians, and
Sure.
I was making fun of you actually, and that's how I became turned on to whatever you guys are doing here. I didn't even know you were a programmer. I didn't know you were working with that AI stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really cool. I was a software engineer for a long time, and consultant and stuff like that.
Yeah, man.
So I wanted to see your code. You're on like GitHub. I got a pretty bad head injury.
You were asking about the repository. So I stream with Cliff on Monday and Wednesday, and on Wednesday I'll ask him to share the repository.
Okay.
But yeah, we have repositories for that stuff that have the programs we use. They're free to use, so anybody can use them. Yeah.
Nice.
The one program you can probably find on is MAVE, Modular Agent-Based Evolver, MABE. So if you look up that, it'll come up in a wiki and stuff like that. That's awesome. But you said you were trolling I sometimes, what do you think about trolling the trolls? Because it's sometimes fun. It's sometimes it is fun, and I'm guilty of it too. Just sort of blowing off steam sometimes. Yeah, so I'm a little
Just
guilty
for fun.
sometimes.
I get banned. I'm banned on most things. I started using just like my real name and stuff, just so I would stop, doing it so much.
That's interesting.
But whenever I get called out,
So what was what had you how long ago did you deconvert, and do you remember what your thought process was like at the time? Like, do you remember what it was, or?
It was a slow process. I remember like fully believing and reading the Bible. Pretty much when I was I pretty much read the Bible and like Shakespeare is my only two books. That's all I would read for whatever reason. And then it just went from that to like, when was that stuff written and who wrote it? It's like the answers are like not good.
Right.
And that's always like the starting point. So it's like, I think really taking maybe after I went back to school and I started taking anthropology classes.
Yeah.
I think that is exactly where that was the turning point.
Yeah, because that starts to fill in a lot of the details on the naturalist side, and yeah, I definitely I can relate to that because I did my master's in biological anthropology, and that was definitely it felt like turning over a lot of those stones. And yeah, I don't even think the apologists realize that like they don't realize the depth of how many of us are like this, because we really were believers and we went looking for those answers and they weren't satisfying, and they keep pretending that they found more satisfying answers.
And the hard part is that they're such good people. Like most of like these people that really truly believed and believe their whole lives, they're like out there like trying to help people and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like they're doing good things. So it's like it's so hard for me to like be like, oh, you guys don't know shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't do it.
Yeah. Do you have any? Are you where are you at on like this whole mythicism thing? Because I think we're going to be talking about that here in a little bit. Do you?
I have no clue. I listen to like Carrier's arguments and I agree with those, and then I listen to like Neil's argument, like the Litwa arguments, and then I hear that one. You can kind of look at the YouTube comments and just search for like Richard Carrier, and you can see all the little back and forths that those guys did, which is pretty fun. I mean, so truthfully, I'm really with Carrier.
You think so?
I do. I don't think this stuff's real at all. I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't any people named Jesus way back then.
Obviously,
and I don't think that, I don't know. I just, it just seems like all made up. Like whatever's left of between there being a real, person named Jesus and not that, it's almost like there's no difference. It's so made up.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of agnostic because I honestly waffle back and forth between the two. But I certainly, when I think about it critically, I come to that ultimate conclusion that there's very little difference between the two positions at this point, because if it was a real dude, what we know of that dude is myth. And if there just simply wasn't a dude, it really isn't changing much for me. And I have to admit that in some sense, existence has to be considered the most mundane claim about anyone ever. Like, Tux existed. Like, cool, great. You
did it.
Yeah, so it doesn't do much. But here's my recent take on it, because I used to think it was stupid. So here was the reason. Because let's say mythicism position is true, that's fine. Historicism, don't care. But it felt like it was such an emotional thing to bring up to Christians, like, don't do it. I remember the one time I kind of mentioned it to my mom. I mean, it shut down the conversation. Like, it's like, I gotta go. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a real conversation stopper. But now I actually think it's an important topic, and maybe importance a bit strong of word, let's say interesting topic and relevant topic, because I think that it's a crucial form of doubt. Like for me, that was a critical piece of doubt. I went looking for the historical Jesus. As a believer, it's going to sound silly, but as a believer, I went looking for the historical Jesus because I knew I couldn't be like a God. Right. So as a believer, I was on, I was raised in the WWJD bracelet era. Right. So you imagine
what is that?
The WWJD, what would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So literally, like, trying to answer that question, I said, well, I can't tap into Jesus's God nature because I'm not God. So I have to know as much as I can about who was this dude. What was this dude like that he was that example? And so that had me reading stuff like this book called Son of Man. I would later realize it's kind of like an apologist book, but it basically situates Jesus in a human context, right? It tries to get you to piece together what his life would have been like. And then I think that led to deeper questions. And then eventually I looked up, like, did Jesus exist? And I think that was the first time I really saw the atheist case laid out online for the fact that he didn't exist. So where I'm going with all of this is that while I get people who say it's such a tough topic for most Christians, you might as well avoid it because it's too emotional. And also it's not a slam dunk. Like why? Like there's so many things we can definitively show. Like why go to the one thing we can't? The reason is because I think doubt is really important. And this is a thing where I think we can meet Christians on, right? Like I'm not meeting you between evolution and creationism. I'm not meeting you on old earth, young earth. I'm not meeting you on anything divine or miraculous about Jesus. Those are all non-starters for me. Mm-hmm. But a conversation about, who was Jesus really? Did he exist or not? The Christian's going to have their take on it. I'm going to have my take on it. And it's one of those issues where if I could get them to even see why people doubt it, that actually gets us into all those other conversations we want to have about the authenticity of the Bible, how many witnesses were there, the ordering and historicity and stuff. So I think it's sort of like a gateway conversation.
It's hard though. It's too hard to have.
It might be. I might be wrong. It's just what I'm thinking.
I'm saying. For me, it's too hard. I get nervous. My heart was beating. I was having a panic attack when we started the conversation. Truthfully.
Right. Yeah. So imagine having it with the believer. Yeah. It's
right. I would be healed pretty quick though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If somebody would have put it to me younger, the historicity thing, I definitely would have looked into it, and I think I would have had doubts sooner. Yeah, Jerome, we're having a open room. Yeah. All right. So look, I want to show y'all this piece. It's kind of a cool thing that came out today, so we might as well have some fun with it. I just pulled up the wrong screen, of course.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm signing off.
Yeah. All right, John, appreciate you. Thanks for calling in, buddy. Yeah, we came over to the cafe. That way we could do a little open call-in after the Skeptic Haven. And I was like all good to show you guys what's going on. I think John, it just didn't disconnect John's screen for some reason. All right, here we go. Boom, bang, let's do it.
Dr. Richard Carey, I have a question from a Patreon fan.
Figure it out and go forward.
All right, now let me show you this photo that Donald Trump posted.
All right, I got a lot going on. I did not do that correctly. All right, so Myron bot needs to be turned off. Cafe bot needs to be turned off. All right, now I accidentally played something.
him sticking out his tongue, sitting in the speaker's chair next to Vice President Harrison behind President Biden. His tongue is out, and he's touching his stomach. It's this very strange,
it's so weird.
Malignant, narcissistic, weird.
It's so funny hearing people make fun of Donald Trump. All right, we'll get back to that. That was funny, though. I'm like, what is this? What is this? Good times. Good times. All right. Come on, screen. I need to change this HDMI cable. I have a screen that like always lags when I turn it off, and I'm just really need to replace the cable and stop being lazy.
He's a fan of yours and mine.
All right, here we go, babe. Let's do it.
Dr. Richard Carrier, I have a question from a Patreon fan. He's a fan of yours and mine, Joel Pearson.
Yeah.
I often hear the apologetic argument that Jesus can't be compared to all the other demigods because the length of time between his supposed place in history and the first historical narratives is shorter than we have records of for older figures like that. What is the best response to this? Is it just a fallacious argument, personal incredulity, cherry-picking, non sequitur, or is there some validity to this reasoning?
Right. I have a whole section answering this, right, on the historicity of Jesus about rapid legendary development as an objection. So I have a whole section answering this. So any answer I give right now is really just summarizing what's there with examples and so forth. There are multiple problems with the argument. One is we actually don't know that it's true. So just because, we don't know when the myths of, let's say, Hercules or Bacchus and so forth started, right? Like we have much later documents that long postdate how these religions and these myths were circulating. So we actually don't know how soon, like within the times that they were set, that these stories were built. However, that's a weak objection because I think it doesn't matter. The length of time is irrelevant. Generally, when we see myths like this, about 40 years is a typical time for a total myth like this to arise. And I give multiple real-world examples in there. So we've got the Roswell myth as a classic case. The John Frum myth, where you get the invention of John Frum. Ned Ludd is another case. In all of these cases, they all get invented in roughly the same timeline as Jesus. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the rate at which people naturally die, right? So, and all of these things tended to happen before we had long lifespans like we have now. People did have long lifespans back then, but much more rarely. So, the average life expectancy was roughly 48 if you survived childhood. So, that means half of adults are dead before they're 50. And so this radically changes how much access to past memory that you are going to have. And then you add in the fact that people aren't critical thinkers. They aren't educated. They, there's no newspapers to rifle through, right? So the invention of legends is actually quite easy. It's actually easier in first century Judea, first century Roman Empire, than in the 20th century when we have John Frum, or the 18th century when you have Ned Ludd. Those are eras in which we have newspapers and have widespread literacy and stuff like that. So the fact that it can happen within a 40-year span, and that's roughly the timeline we're looking at for Jesus, doesn't really. So that tells us that it can happen. So we really can't say that it's improbable. I think what is more important is the decision as to where to put beings in history. So you have Jesus, for example, is actually put in two different periods of history. There's actually the Eastern chronology puts him at 70 BC. Is when he dies. Western chronology is the one we're more familiar with, which is under Pontius Pilate, right, which is 30 AD. So they're about 100 years apart. When you look at a lot of the other heroes,
I don't know what that is. What?
That was probably me. Sorry.
What, the beeping?
Well, I'm trying to lower a volume here. Sorry.
It's okay. No worries.
They're put close to or in the vicinity of the Trojan War, or what was believed to be the date of the Trojan War, because that was politically relevant. Romulus is put at the believed date of the origin of Rome because that's politically relevant. So it's not really so much the length of time that's the issue, right? Like, so it can be a long time, it can be hundreds of years, or it can be 40 years. The decision isn't really based on how much time you have to wait for it to be possible. The decision of what time to put someone in has to do with the politics of what story you want to tell about them. Where is it important to put them? And so it's usually at the origin of whatever they represent. So if the religion began in the 30s AD, and there's evidence to suggest that it did, even if Jesus didn't exist, for example. There's evidence that it began in the 30s AD. Now, maybe it began 100 years earlier. I don't know. But the preponderance of evidence suggests 30s AD. So that's where you're going to put Jesus, right? You're going to put him there. So really the only challenge there is, would you get away with it? And, in other words, because it's the recency of time is the only remaining argument is, could you get away with it because of the recency of the time? And the analogy that I put in Jesus from Outer Space, which is my latest book, and it comes from an article on my blog, but it's in Jesus from Outer Space, is that let's forget about historicity for a minute. Let's just talk about physical resurrection of Jesus. It's absolutely clear that in Paul's day, and I'm talking the 50s, that Jesus was never met physically resurrected. That they were encountered in hallucinations and dreams that they themselves regarded as revelations. They did not touch the hands of Jesus and have dinner with him. Like that didn't even exist then. And yet within 40 years time, less than 40 years time, 20 years time, Mark is talking about an empty tomb. Within 30 years time, Matthew is talking about a Jesus showing up on a mountain. 40 years.
All right, so Tux, this is what you're saying, right? That originally we're not even talking about a bodily resurrection. That's part of your conversation with Kevin?
Yeah, I think in 1 Corinthians 15:44 through 47, you have a scenario where Paul is trying to decipher between Jesus not being of the earth, being in heaven, and Adam, the first man, being of earth. Adam of earth, and he repeats it several times, multiple times. Adam is earthy.
Right.
Jesus is heavenly. Adam is made of earth stuff. Jesus is made of heavenly stuff. So it goes back and forth, and it goes back to the first fruits, and Adam was the first earthy fruit. Jesus is the first heavenly fruit.
And you said this is, where is this at? This is in 1 Corinthians, you said?
1 Corinthians 15:44 through 47 or 8 or 9, somewhere in there.
All right. Why am I not getting? You said 1 Corinthians, what chapter?
15. Same famous chapter as the Creed.
Is None, can you mute your mic if you're not talking? There's somebody's back there got like a can or something going.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not me. I'm in a quiet basement.
No, it's None. I just muted them.
I live in my wife's basement. Mrs. Tux provides me with his man cave.
All right, so 1 Corinthians 15, and you said it's at the end, 44?
About 44 is when he starts going into...
So it will be with the resurrection of the dead, the body that is sown is perishable. It is raised up imperishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. Damn, that's pretty explicit, bro.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing: is that King James?
No. This is I don't know which version this is. It is.
I'll put it this way:
NIV.
If you use Young's literal translation.
Okay.
Can you use that one?
Yeah, I should be able to. Yeah.
Go to Young's literal translation.
Why do you like
Young's
literal translation? Why do you like Young's literal?
Because it's as close as, it's not going to be phonetically correct all the time. It's not going to follow proper English grammar.
Right.
But it's a literal translation of the Greek.
Okay.
And you can see it, what it is supposed to read, and it's choppy, but it reads closer to what it means in Greek, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the translators took this copy from sometime, scribal copy, Young's literal translation kind of finds the oldest copy or the most preserved copy and translates it directly to English from the Greek without properly using the sentence structure.
Gotcha. All right. So also is the rising again of the dead. It is sown in corruption, is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. So also it hath been written, the first man, Adam, became a living creature. The last Adam is for a life-giving spirit. But that which is spiritual is not first, but that which is natural. Afterwards, that which is spiritual. The first man is out of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord out of heaven. As is the earthy, such are also the earthy. And as is the heavenly, such are also the heavenly. And according as we did bear the image of the earthly, we shall bear also the image of the heavenly. And this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood, the reign of God, is not able to inherit, nor doth the corruption inherit the incorruption. Lo, I tell you a secret, we indeed shall not all sleep, and we all shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, in the last trumpet, for it shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For it behooveth this corruptible to put on incorruption, and this mortal to put on immortality. And when this corruptible may have put on incorruption, and this mortal may have put on immortality, and when this corruptible may have put on incorruption, this mortal may have put on immortality, then shall we be brought to pass the word that hath been written, the death was swallowed up to victory. Where, O death, thy sting? Where, O Hades, thy victory? And the sting of death is sin, and the power of the sin the law. And to God, thanks to him who is giving us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ, so that, my brethren beloved, become ye steadfast, unmovable, abounding in the work of the Lord at all times, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Yeah, I mean, it's really like, I mean, I hate to say this, but like, don't you wonder how this ends up in the Bible like this? Because because you're like, wait, why did they just change it? like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's giving away the game right there, at least according to modern Christianity. Right now, if you'd have hit me back when I was a Christian, I'd have been all about the spiritual resurrection than a bodily. But most Christians ain't gonna go there with you. So it's almost amusing that it's right there in the plain translation.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think it was whitewashed. Like, I think when the Gospels started to come out about the time the temple was destroyed, and the apocalyptic preachers or whoever orchestrated the Christianity as we know it was being essentially written, in my opinion, Paul's writings may have had some variation of more spiritualness like that, a little more obvious. Maybe in the Creed, for instance, because it kind of touches it even there where you were reading it towards the end. In 51, that is referring to people dying and getting their
spiritual body.
And then later on, it goes to the trumpets. That is direct signification to Jesus returned when the trumpets sound. I think in 1 Thessalonians 4,
The other thing that's interesting,
16 area
too, and I don't know if you caught this, but maybe Cameron and some of the others out there will, like, for those of us that came from like really churchy traditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can always recognize when you're reading a well-read passage of the Bible because of the lyrics, right? And so, you know, the sort of being caught up and the whole twinkling of an eye, like there's definitely like phrases in there that are used a lot, right, in lyrics and sort of biblical. So you sort of know they're there. No surprise, we're in Paul's letters, but it's sort of, you're sort of seeing the two things at once. You're going, well, it's really obvious here that it's talking about a spiritual resurrection, not a bodily one, and then you're like. And also, there's no way you can tell me you guys aren't deep in this passage of the Bible because I know how many goddamn songs you've written from this chapter. So I know y'all are reading this shit because you keep writing songs about it. So you're right. There has to be some sort of real rationalization, whitewashing, whatever we want to call it. That
I don't know that for
not
sure.
Get this.
Keep in mind.
Sure.
But something's not on the level, in my opinion. I also think it goes back to 15:6. In the Young's literal translation, you can use Strong's and Young's literal translation both at the same time, and you can hover over in Bible Hub, and it shows you what each word may also mean. And if you use that,
you said this is Bible Hub.
Yeah, here.
That's interesting.
I'll do a screen share if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
And let's see. I'll do it here. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I've got this. I already have Daniel. I don't know why I was looking at Daniel. Poor Dan. Corinthians 15 and 15, and let's use Strong's. Are you able to see mine? See my screen?
Oh, yeah. Let me put up big.
Tab and gather. There we go.
No, we're good. I got it.
Let's see if you're able to see when my hover. If my hover works. Can you see the hover?
I see it turned a light color.
It turned a light, but I don't see it popping
it didn't
up.
Pop up.
So the screen share does not show, but I can highlight it.
Let me try it. You said it's what is it? Bible Hub?
Here.
Or is it? You said Bible Hub.
Yep, Bible Hub.
And then you go on.
Go to the upper corner where it says Bible. It reads Bible right now in a drop down menu up above that one. No, the next drop down menu just north of that one.
This yeah, okay.
There you go. Strong's YLT.
Okay, and then
go to Corinthians at the top. The drop down menu for Corinthians. You might be able to do it that way. Just there you go.
And then
so you can hover over each word.
Yeah, what
and
verse
you can
am I in
pop
down here? Give me a verse.
So yours, I can see yours.
Yeah,
so
give me a verse. Give me a verse. What verse should I grab?
Look at 6. Start with. I would start with 6.
He appeared.
Afterwards, he appeared to above 500 brother at once.
Now you had a thing about this, right?
Yeah. So
here's that the two above could be above or more than
above 500, above, comma, more than. So which does it mean? Does it mean more than 500?
And what this is telling me is that
the presence of up here in above, or more
and this is not telling me an alternate word, this is telling me one word with alternate meaning. So it was definitely apano is the translated word, and it can mean both above or more than.
Right.
Similar to the way it does now, right? It's just
just the
same
way it does. So what does it mean? Does it mean that they were referring to a heavenly
but see, this screwed with me. I'm already done. You know why? Because this is me as a Christian. As a Christian, I just go, he appeared to... Actually, you know what? I could rationalize that either way, because I could say above just meant...
It just depends on what above
means. What does above
For everything
mean?
that
It just
I
means
brought up.
over their head. Like a yarmulke appears above a Jew, right? But it just means more than 500 people had an appearance. An appearance just means they felt his presence. I don't know. Right. I was just on that bullshit, bro.
So that's why you start with 44 and you talk about the natural body and a spiritual body. Natural body, spiritual body. Adam's an earthly creature. Jesus is a heavenly creature, or the spirit is a heavenly creature. And the way it goes back and forth, especially when it says the first man is out of the earth, earthy. And the second man is the Lord of heaven, heavenly.
Wow.
As is the earthy, such are the earthy, and such as is the heavenly, such are also the heavenly. So if you show that there's a difference between here and there, so
constantly
when you
that's a theme.
And then when you show 51, I tell you a secret: we all indeed shall not all sleep, and we all shall be changed. Right?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Before you all go.
All sleep.
You're not going to all die.
You're not going to all die. Some of you are going to get this heavenly body. So if you go back to 6 and you do, afterwards he appeared to above 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain till now, and certain also did fall asleep. So Jesus is supposed to return in this generation before it tastes death. I think Paul is doing damage control. I think he's saying, hey, not all of you have died. Not all of you have died.
Right.
Only some of you have died.
And I'm going to go ahead and admit
even if those people died,
will.
Don't worry. There's heavenly stuff that can resurrect them in this above realm.
And this is what I'm saying is that if you see this, you have to. For us, we would see the Bible itself as an evolving document, literally, right? Now, if you don't, this is all just there. But if you do, then to us, this is obviously an apologetic in the Bible. And this is part of the reasons why Christians don't realize there's such a problem in the Bible, right? Because they treat the Bible as though it did not have time to address concerns within the Bible. When you look at it as an evolving document, all the Bible is addressing concerns of previous scripture, right? The whole thing is freaking constructing apologetics of problems raised by previous scripture.
So here's,
but yeah, that's what you think Paul's doing here, right? He's been challenged and he's fighting back.
Yeah. I think so.
So now, do you think there was no story?
He is being asked by the church in Corinth. We've been out here busting our butts, building this congregation, building this ministry, and we were promised the return of Jesus before we died in this generation. And he's basically having to address that. And his damage control is hey, even if you've died, it's not all lost. There's two different bodies here. There's two different ways to obtain, this reward that you've been promised. Now, whether or not Paul is sincere or he's doing a Ponzi scheme, a marketing, an MLM Christian scheme,
right,
to the Gentiles, I don't know. I think he was a con man, but he could have been sincere. He could have had, a vision. If I had the same vision Paul had, I can take what I learned just the same, and I can create a ministry that's a scam, just the same.
Right.
Or I can give this gift of, and here's the thing, my conversation the other night with some of the Christians I was talking to this guy named Bruce and P-Town. And my plea to them is, you can enjoy this movie all you want, but I already know how it ends. I know the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Sixth Sense. It shows you that the guy dies at the beginning. But if you enjoy the movie without thinking that he's dead, and then there's a nice big reveal at the end, it's really enjoyable movie. And then you're like, oh, I should have seen it coming. And I was telling P-Town directly, I'm telling you, the Bible tells you it's deception right at the very beginning. The kid sees dead people. The God sees deception and warns you about knowledge of good and evil. Guess what? The whole thing's deception and knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
The plant is the same in that M. Night Shyamalan movie and in Quentin Tarantino movies. He gives the plot away right at the beginning almost every time he makes a movie. He weaves the story together where it's much more enjoyable knowing he's given it away and you didn't see it.
Really?
Weaving the story together like Quentin Tarantino. Because a lot of times he shows a final scene or a second to the final scene at the very beginning of the movie.
Right, and then you spend the whole movie
building up
into getting right
to
back
that point, and then the movie continues for a little bit after that.
Right.
And that's that's what I feel like the storytelling is, except I don't think there's a supernatural being that did it.
Right.
I don't think there's any supernatural beings that exist. Humans are fully capable
and it's not even
this.
a fun conspiracy because the writers are never sitting together in the same room themselves, right? They're all like, you know what I mean? They're all separated by hundreds of years, and they're not even telling the same story, right? There's like a bunch of Jewish scriptures in there. Yeah. The Christians take it later and spin it in a different direction. So they're not even, it's not even really flowing together. Man, it's really. I realize it's a fun way to kind of study the Bible. Bible Hub. I'm kind of you showing me the power tools here. I really like that.
Another way to do it that's a little bit better, but it's not as. If you're doing it for learning, I would recommend the Blue Letter Bible instead of Bible Hub.
The Blue Letter Bible.
The Blue Letter Bible, and that's a better way when you're learning it. Now, when you're trying to express it just like we did on Bible Hub, see how easy that was.
Right. What do you like about this Blue Letter Bible?
It's just laid out. Yeah, it's just laid out in a way where you can compare Greek words comparatively, where instead of hovering over it, it's a lot faster to do it the way we did it in Bible Hub, but it's a lot more immersive when you get perfect. So when you see that little blue bar over to the side, click the blue bar and see how it interacts a little different. You can go to whatever translation. You could break it down in Greek. You can see what each word may mean. Like it's.
Oh, this is really, really in depth.
Yeah, just it.
Wow. Commentaries, dictionaries.
There's even a section where you can get actual copy, like an animated copy of the text that they got it from. A screenshot or a scan or something like that, and you can see where it is and compare it up, line it up. Like it's
Wow.
Yeah,
this is crazy.
Yeah. Like you can go down so many rabbit holes.
Yeah,
if you want to learn the Bible inside and out, this is where you go.
That's crazy. These are great resources, and we'll have to put them in integrate them into the gather here in different ways. It's an interesting way to customize our gather. So the church, actually, if you go to the church pulpit in the Church of the Flying Man, the big book in the front is like the Book of Myron. That's actually interactable. It'll take you to Bible Gateway, but I think I'm going to replace it with one of these tools, and then maybe I'll put one up here or something. These are really cool. So I want to get your thoughts on a couple other things. So before we change topics completely, wrap up on your thoughts with Kevin. Like, do you think, to me, it feels, and I don't know if it's like a cheap thrill, but it feels like that those conversations are more productive when you're talking to someone that's genuinely listening and open and trying to learn rather than an apologist. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's a much greater chance of there being some sort of meaningful influence on it. Do you get that feeling as well, or is there some sort of frustration I'm missing? Like, is it frustrating when someone's seeing all this but still hanging on to it for some odd reason? You know what I mean? Like,
I'll put it this way. I know where I was at in the fall of 2015. Let me find an email. I want to read you an email that I sent out. I found a guy who had a website that was very much seeking truth. Now, his website was a little more aliens are in the Bible-esque, which I didn't really care about, but the points he was making about the Bible were firm and solid, on good, solid foundation. And the comment section, going back and forth about some of the origins of Genesis in the Hebrew language and stuff like that, really filled my head full of different ways to look at the texts, different ways to look at the story, and it answered a lot of questions. And so I wrote him an email, and I want to read you a paragraph that I sent to him. This is dated August 17th, 2015. Let me read my background. I'm a Christian with trust issues of the Bible. I was raised, my father was a Church of Christ minister, and as an adult feel it is somewhat falsified divine. Not false entirely, but shady origins with questionable intent, inconsistency in translation, all the councils involved in making a canon, Roman Empire corruption, Saul/Paul, seed of deceit and distrust. I also have read the non-canon books as well. My uncle was Sufi and also had studied the Sufi masters. I've read some of the Quran, not all. Sufi masters' study involved far more theological thought and not as much surah reference. So talk about unable to serve two masters. I also have followed the spirit of powwows. The name of the spirit that we followed was named Wakanda, ironically enough.
Damn.
See, I'm married to a Catholic family, so through all this, I'm still a Christian. Maybe not, but I believe in an invisible man in the sky, whatever I am.
And this is you, or this is the guy?
This is me. This is me writing.
But wait, you studied all that Muslim stuff? I didn't know that.
I have. Yes.
What was going on there?
Well, my uncle was Sufi. He was ordained Sufi when I was a kid. And I hung around my uncle for a little while. I learned some of his knowledge and explored it. He died in the mid-90s. And I inherited some of his books. And I studied those in 2006.
So you were really seeking.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Wow. And and then you married into a Catholic family. Okay.
Married into a Catholic family. Yeah.
Is your family still religious?
Not really.
Okay.
Basically, they went through their, all their Catholic courses and stuff like that, and they were very much, going into college. Both of them were Catholics, and pretty much after their freshman year,
just the in-laws,
they were pretty much done with believing that there was seriousness to the religion. So higher education really is a detriment to the Christian faith.
Absolutely.
Really is.
Absolutely.
I mean, all you have to do is take one or two courses in liberal arts, and you pretty much have found out knowledge that was withheld, and it's provably true.
Yep.
So as long as you look the other way and you keep your faith on some of the stuff, then you still come out religious.
So you emailed the guy from this site, and what happened after that?
He responded. He loved my letter. He put commentary in each section. I wrote him a novella. I wrote him about I'd say a 4,500 word email.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
You really laid it. You poured it out. You had to sit down for that one.
Let's see. Let me read one of his responses.
Yeah, sure.
He's like, let's see. My humility is delicious. So I had just watched the documentary on Nova about Hubble. And, basically I kind of touched on its comparisons to In the Beginning and, the potential of earning your own planet in John 14. Because he was a little alien oriented, again. And he was like, his response was, it's a great topic, but I can't imagine what I would say other than what you say later in this letter, namely that the religion has become so upside down, this anti-abortion, anti-gay, anti-democratic baloney being slung by evangelicals, that if Jesus were to come again, he'd likely face the same demise by the same people. Like you said, they seem to view studying the word as an asterisk or an afterthought. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn, that's good. So, yeah. So that's so back to Kevin. So you recognize that place, right? I
recognize that place,
and you think that there's productive growth on the other side of it still. Like it's not, it's just a part of it, just part of the process.
That's the thing. He has to do this on his own. There isn't really anything I can sell him. I can sell him Blue Letter Bible and Young's Literal Translation all day long. It's something he has to determine at this point. I left him with an article from The Atlantic from a few years ago, I think. I don't know if he read it, but I will say one of the most helpful things when I read that about 6 months after writing this email, for instance, is the association with being told what's true when you're a kid. It's a language you speak. That language, if you move from this country and say move to Spain, Mexico City, for instance, you immediately go to Mexico City. Whether you know Spanish or not, you don't immediately forget English the next day. That language is still there. You might, after 20 years, lose practice. You're out of practice of speaking the language, but it's still there. You may even occasionally dream in English if you picked up another language and you primarily speak it. And it's the same thing with religion. There is no learning the language of hell if it was put into your head at the young age of don't touch what's hot, it'll burn you. Do what's right, it'll burn you. Or it'll burn you. You know, those intrinsic knowledge is given to you at a young age, and it is hard to unlearn that language. And Kevin, I feel, is in that scenario right now. He's been taught, don't touch that glowing burner on the stove at the age of 2.5 and 3. I'm smacking your hand because I don't want you to burn yourself. Well, our hands have been smacked to believe this, or you're going to go to hell. I'm doing this. I smacked your hand for a good reason. And the lesson we learned, whenever we learned it, even if it was in our teens, even if it was later in life, we picked up a language called hell. And it's hard to unlearn it.
Do you think that's one of his sticking points, Hal?
I just know the
usual narrative.
The psychology. I think I know the psychology of what he's thinking. It might not be that point. You know, there's a community that's full of love. If you associate that loving community with the works of Jesus, it's the same language. It's just, you know, I use the brute fact form of it instead of the emotional side of it. It's the same though. I said brute fact. I meant brute force. I meant the brute force part of it. You know, how many times have you been to church and they're like, oh, come to the potluck. Oh, have you met this nice girl? You know, they kind of tantalize you, the carrot and sticks of the congregation.
Right.
We'll keep your belly filled, and we'll keep a loving community around you if you come and join us. Or it's the fire and brimstone, hell awaits, and the brute force of, if you're not threatening with hell, you're not using enough.
Yes. Yeah. This is sort of my feeling about soft Christianity. Like, it's almost like you're not doing it right, because if you're honest about the faith, it's always demanding more of you. Right. So, you know, it's almost like, I remember joking coming up, we'd see the Jehovah's Witnesses going from door to door, or we'd see the Mormon kids on mission who moved across the country to evangelize, right? And we would almost joke, and we would say, like, damn, they're really serious about their faith. Right now, this is my Christian family joking about, damn, the Mormons are serious about their faith, right? Because we recognized even then that we were not doing that for Jesus. Do you see what I'm saying? But if we were really honest about the biblical man to go and, you know, spread the gospel to the four corners of the earth or whatever, we'd all be doing that, right? It's the one thing I did love about the church I played at, was they took it that seriously, right? They were there, most of them were from Iowa, right? So their whole thing was planning a church. And they put planning a church first and everything else second. Their entire family, spouse, everybody was on board with, y'all, we moving to Michigan to plant this church. And when the Lord said we moving to Michigan now, them motherfuckers was moving to Michigan now. That meant selling houses, quitting jobs, you know, rooming together with friends, 3 or 4 families in a house till people get settled, right? I mean, literally, like, I'm talking grown-ass families with careers, bro. Imagine, like, you and your family living with 2 other families for 6 months because y'all need to time, right, to buy houses and find new jobs and all of that. Like, they're that get up and go with theirs, right? And so I always tell them, y'all are a damn cult. but I love it, right? Because everything was different in a church with that level of commitment. Right, they're really about it. But yeah, it was fun, and I think that's really true. That they're kind of always demanding more of you. I wanted to quickly summarize some of these tools for people. I think these are helpful. So this Blue Letter Bible we were looking at, it's got these powerful study tools built into it, the search functions, and you guys saw some of the comparisons and all these supplemental resources, but I also wanted to quickly touch on these different translations. So Young's Little translation of the Bible into English, published in 1862, was made by Robert Young, compiler of Young's Analytic Concordance to the Bible and Concise Critical Comments on the New Testament. Young used Tectus Receptus and the Masoretic text as the basis of his translation. He wrote in the preface of the first edition, "It has been no part of the translator's plan to attempt to form a new Hebrew or Greek text. He has therefore somewhat rigidly adhered to the received ones." Young produced the quote-unquote revised version of his translation in 1887, but he stuck with the received text. He wrote in the preface of the revised edition, "The Greek text followed is that generally recognized as the revised text, not because it is thought perfect, but because the department of translation is quite distinct from that of textual criticism, and few are qualified for both. If the original text be altered by a translator, except he gives his reasons for and against each emendation, the reader is left in uncertainty whether the translation given is to be considered as that of the old or of the new reading. A new revised edition was released 10 years after Robert Young's death, October 14th, 1888. The 1898 version was based on the TR, Textus Receptus, easily confirmed by the word bathe in Revelation 1:5 and the word again in Revelation 25. The publisher's notes, the third edition, explains the work has been subjected to a fresh revision, making no alteration on the principles on which the translation proceeds, but endeavoring to make it as nearly perfect in point of accuracy on its present lines as possible. So the translation philosophy is that it's a very literal translation of the original in the Hebrew Greek text. If a translation gives a present tense when the original gives a past, or a past when it has a presence, a perfect or for a future, or future for a perfect, an a for the, a the for an imperative for a subjective, or a subjunctive for an imperative, a verb for a noun for a verb, it's clear that the verbal inspiration is as much overlooked as if it has had no existence. The word of God is made void by the traditions of men. Therefore, Young used the present tense in many places in which other translations use the past tense, particularly in narratives. Yeah, so incredibly literal. All right, normally compared to the King James Version, which is an English translation of the Christian Bible for the Church of England, which was commissioned in 1604, published in 1611, sponsorship by King James. The 80 books of the King James Version include the 39 books of the Old Testament, the Apocrypha, the intertestamental section, including 14 books of what Protestants consider the Apocrypha, and the 27 books of the New Testament. Noted for its majesty of style, the King James Version has been described as one of the most important books in English culture and a driving force in shaping the English-speaking world. So this, right, it's totally different, right? And so that's a lot of times what we're comparing to is like this whole majesty style, the these and the thous, and it's like it's the High Valerian Bible. I read the NRSV typically, which is the New Revised Standard Version. It's an English translation published in 1989 by the National Council of Churches. The NRSV was intended as a translation to serve devotional, liturgical, and scholarly needs of the broadest possible range of Christian religious adherents. At present, The New Revised Standard Version is the version most commonly preferred by biblical scholars. This is due to its basis on what are often considered the oldest and most reliable manuscripts and its strict adherence to word-for-word translation. The tradition of the King James Version has been continued in the Revised Standard Version, and in the New Revised Standard Version, the full 84-book translation includes the Protestant enumeration of the Old Testament, the Apocrypha, the New Testament. Another version, the NRSV, includes the Deuteronomical books as part of the Old Testament, which is normative in the canon of the Roman Catholicism, along with the New Testament. So yeah, so there you guys know. So I have like 2 versions of this. I have the Oxford Study version. I have 3 versions of this. I have the Oxford Study one, the red cover. I have the Cultural Study Bible, which has all my maps and artifacts and pictures and craziness. And then and I have both of those also digitally. And then when YouTube Punk got me my this Bible, I don't know how. Juice Space Laser keeps falling. I don't know how, but somehow YouTube Punk got the right version. So this is also an NRSV. Thank goodness. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's the Bible talk. I think my grandparents honestly still read King James Version and NIV. They also have a Message. You know about the Message Bible? It's like narrative translated. It's like the softest version of the Bible. It's easy to read. It's like trying to turn it into like prose or something.
I have read, I think it's that one anyway, and the commentary during Song of Solomon.
Is it funny? That's probably worth doing a stream about. That's probably hilarious. Like funny stuff in study Bibles.
I would recommend looking that up. And the commentary in Song and Solomon of, this shouldn't even be in the Bible, but since it's in the Bible, you should go home and have sex with your wife and only your wife.
And only in this position. AR, I grew up on the NIV. Yeah, I think the NIV is in my family too. A lot of NIVs. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting just to think about versions. So one of the things that I know the NRSV does, it's like more the inclusive pronoun tradition of the Bible where possible. Those type of things are all considerations. God, there's so many damn versions of that book.
What was it called? You called it the commentators' Bibles.
The Cultural Study Bible.
The one your parents said. I said the Song of Solomon.
Oh, the Message.
Excuse me.
It's called the Message Bible. Yeah.
Message Bible. Let's see if that's in here. Barnes Notes, Cambridge. I don't see the Message.
No. It's like I think it's branded. I don't know if it's an official, like the Message Bible. You got to buy it. It's got a website, messagebible.com.
Maybe it's under T. The Message.
Oh yeah, MSG. MSG. It should be under.
MSG.
It's on Bible Gateway at least. The Message. All right, here we go. Why was the Message written? The best answer to that question comes from Eugene Peterson himself. While I was teaching a class on Galatians, I began to realize that the adults in my class weren't feeling the vitality and directness that I sensed as I read and studied the New Testament in its original Greek. Writing straight from the original text, I began to attempt to bring into English the rhythms and idioms of the original language. I knew that the early readers of the New Testament were captured and engaged by these writings, and I wanted my congregation to be impacted in the same way. I hoped to bring the New Testament to life for 2 different types of people: those who hadn't read the Bible because it seemed too distant and irrelevant, and those who had read the Bible so much that it had become old hat. Yeah. The goal of the message to engage people in the reading process and help them understand what they read. This is not a study Bible, but rather a reading Bible. The verse numbers, which are not in the original documents, have been left out of the print version to facilitate easy and enjoyable reading. The original books of the Bible were not written in formal language. The message tries to recapture the word in the words we use today.
Yeah, I don't see.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, they out on Gateway.
I just remember the reading a Bible similar to that had, commentary.
Yeah.
Some apologists commentary.
Right, built in. Yeah, absolutely. The message would be that one. If you saw it in print, I'm sure it's got lots of commentary in it. Yeah, because they're usually done up all fancy and stuff, and like it's for reading. So it's all interesting. I actually I'm not being facetious at all in that regard. I actually find that part of it, like all the different translations, what motivates them, what considerations they make, examples of how, popular passages can be translated based on those differences. I find that to be like a genuinely fascinating study. I don't think you have to believe in the text or not to feel that way. It's a cool kind of cultural evolution, right, of different Bibles for different needs and all of that stuff. So yeah, I want to play. So something I wanted to ask you about. So my thing with your conversation with Kevin, I feel bad. I feel like we're picking on him, but I'm not trying to. Because it was like him. I know we're not. Yeah, we're not. I just mean, but I had a conversation similar with a gentleman. I can't remember his name. He was like a redhead. He was still playing bass in a worship band. My conversation with him was great, but I feel like I want to have more conversations like with that, but I can count the people I've had those conversations with on one hand, because for the most part, we deal with these radicalized, fully entrenched apologists, and it just goes nowhere. So yeah, that was a really refreshing for me. I thought that was great. I hope we can find more people like that to talk to.
Yeah, I enjoy. I played poker with him. I played poker to him yesterday, actually, and
with who? Kevin?
Kevin.
Oh, okay.
And he got second place in the tournament. I got third place in the tournament. He knocked me out.
Oh, so he's decent. He can play. He can play some poker.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well.
That's cool.
He does pretty well. Let me see what his tournament standings are.
What's your current deal with your?
Let's see.
Well, while we're on it, we should start setting up some poker nights and gather. It's not you guys. I'm a pinochle guy, but Cameron and Lena, a bunch of them play poker. I really like the poker and gather. It's actually quite nice. It's got all this stuff built in.
Let's see if there's a previous quarter. This is the current quarter. And it's basically just yesterday's statistics, I think.
Got you.
No. Let's see. Yeah. He has a second place finish, and I have a first place. Oh no. I have a third place finish. So that's it. He's ahead of me because he got second yesterday.
Who won?
Ray won? Did Ray win?
You said Doug's a really good poker player. What makes somebody is a really good poker player? Is it just the probability?
Yeah, he's pretty quick with the numbers. He knows his percentages down, and he plays the percentages. He's also really good at bluffing.
Okay, that's not surprising.
And knows the percentages to play the board, and usually does pretty well. He gets his hand caught in the cookie jar, but that's the risk you play the way he plays too.
Right.
But more times than not, since he knows those percentages so well, he'll get you. He'll get you good.
Yeah. I've actually been doing a lot better. I had a conversation kind of where you mentioned that to me before, and believe it or not, I actually applied the same logic to Pinochle, and it really helps. So, like, I've more or less memorized. I need to study up on them, but more or less I've memorized like the most common melds.
Yeah.
And so it helps with little things. Like I know if I don't have a run and my partner bids, there's a pretty good chance he does because there's like a 49% chance of a hand having a run. So right. So if I don't have one, chances are he does. You know, and just little stuff, knowing how common marriages are and Pinochle. So it really does help. I like looked that stuff up and I was like, oh yeah, it's really helped me to kind of memorize this. It definitely gives you an edge in playing percentage plays, right? Or thinking about the distribution of cards and stuff. It's knowing the math helps. It really does. So something else I wanted to ask you about, a couple other things. What do you think about this Richard Madsen stuff? I don't know if you've caught wind of any of that. Didn't know if you.
I haven't. You know, the weird thing is he was in the chat I was doing, or he put something in the chat that you were doing something on No Good and Evil, and that you were simulcasting, or I don't know what the term is for simul streaming on No Good and Evil, me talking on Saturday night, I think.
So I was gonna change the name of that channel. I just use it once in a while for testing, and so I've even told people I don't know why people watch it. Anybody that comments there, unless it's like a mod or something, I block them anyway. I don't even want people watching it. But yeah, if I did, I just needed something to test, and you guys were probably live.
I'm subbed to it, so I see when it comes on.
I'm only using it for test. I don't use that channel. I'm probably going to rename it to a test channel because you started a New Good and Evil channel and you've got Tux TV.
I put the New Good and Evil, and we could do No Good and Evil.
And you've got Tux TV, so I'm going to change that channel to just test stuff or whatever.
You know, I'd like to do the podcast show No Good and Evil with someone, or New Good and Evil with someone. I don't know who. I feel like, you know how Howard Stern usually has a color man or somebody who just throws in the quibs.
Sure.
And a female.
Right.
You know, I'm looking for a woman. Everybody hot-voiced woman, and we have a threesome on the microphones every time we turn on the stream.
Yeah, man, that's everybody is, man. That's
so,
you know what I think it is. I think honestly, you just got to make more efforts to start to reach out to female content creators. You know, because the osmosis of this community is only going to bring you more testosterone and incels. So,
so yeah, that's kind of because most podcasts right now are two men.
Yeah.
In this community.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of like to make it a threesome of, atheist, Christian like Kevin, or, some variation of
I think
somebody who gets along, even if it's what's the polar opposite of Kenny?
Yeah.
And a female skeptic, and we gang up on the Christian every week, with sharing ideas how to treat this existence.
Yeah, I think the females
as a marriage instead of a divorce. You know.
Yeah, I think the females in our content creators in our community are not realizing the significance of their voice. Like, I think they're waiting for other females to do it, and we just need that. Like, I've reached out to a couple of people that I don't think they realize like how dire we are trying to get more non-male voices out here.
Jenna,
and I'm like, do I have to beg? Like, what do you?
Have you run into Jenna?
No.
Jenna's got a pretty good thing going. She's in the group with Oz, if you're familiar with him. He's got the what's it called? It's an acronym. It's something like TART or the atheist broadcast. I can't remember.
Sure.
No, I don't remember. He's basically starting a network, and he has Jenna, and I met her at the Better conference that I went to last year.
Tang, somebody said.
Tang, thank you. That would have bothered me. I would have been tossing and turning on my pillow trying to remember it. I also met Heathen Queen. She comes on with Nitty every once in a while.
Yeah, she's been on here a couple times.
There's about 2 months ago, I came across somebody with about 50 subs. Her name was Scarlett, and I have really enjoyed her commentary. Excellent commentary. Kind of a more rehearsed and edited or written out. She almost does a similar blog post style as James Epperson does.
Sure.
But let's see, who else have I come across? Seems like there's one more. I can picture. She's a little bit like where Kevin is, but leaning much more towards. And what's her name? Yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
Also,
I can't remember.
Have you seen any of Rebecca's stuff since she came back?
Only a couple of critiques, but I have not watched.
Sure.
Like, I have no idea what Richard Madsen's... I've seen his thumbnail on a couple of things, but I haven't pressed on them because, I mean, to me, he and I are almost on identical pages. The difference is he thinks aliens did it. And I think man did it.
Yeah. And he thinks Jesus isn't a Jesus here. It's like another earth, and it's true, but he's a Christian. I don't know. It's just all too weird.
So
it's all just too weird.
I enjoy listening to Richard Madsen from time to time, but it's not something I seek out. Like Jay, I enjoy you as well, but there's sometimes I have a fill. You know, my picture is, if it's already full, you come in and you like splash around in that full picture. Like anything you do is overdoing.
Right.
And if my picture's full, I sometimes can't handle Jay. And then other times I'll come on and I'm just like almost addicted to it.
It just depends on what's going on, man.
And it depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
I lurk all the time.
But yeah, that's just been interesting. I didn't expect that to, I have enough, right? I have a threshold with people, and then it just gets to be too much. Rebecca is interesting because she's come back worse. Like, I think she's, it's just the whole thing now.
Yeah, it's always darkest before dawn.
Yeah.
She's going to be Kevin in a year and a half from now, trying to figure out how to unlearn the language of hell.
You think so?
I don't know that.
I always had but see, that's what I'm saying. I had my suspicions that she'd go away and do some reflecting.
Yeah.
And it seems like that I was wrong.
Well, if the Bible says 2 + 2 = 5, she's probably going to reconcile it by discovering she's the one who's wrong and that the Bible is right.
Yeah, yeah.
Until the illusion is shattered and she wishes she could have it back. Or the illusion is somewhat shattered, but it's still a mirror.
I wanted to do a
mirror's a reflection.
I wanted to do a call in. I'm feeling confrontational this year. I really wanted to get into it with people.
Yeah, I mean, I went toe to toe with that Bruce gent. The thing is I didn't want to talk to Bruce. I wanted to talk to Hillary's emails. But Bruce and I dominated the conversation. And,
how'd you
one
feel
thing
about
led
that?
to another. So I apologize, Hillary's emails. I wanted to talk to you and you alone. I should have just booted everybody. And it's funny. I go toe to toe with this Christian for 2+ hours. And at the end, I'm like, okay, it's midnight. I'm shutting it down. It's 2 minutes after midnight. And I give him hey, it's midnight. We're going to shut everything down. I'm going to give Hillary the last word. And he said something, and then somebody else said something, and it went back to him. He said something, and I left him with, hey, if you really think I'm wrong about this, I want you to go back and I want you to compare the footnotes in a 300-year-old Bible to how many footnotes are in your Bible today. And he wanted to refute that. How can you refute that? It's as plain as the nose on your face. I'm sorry. There weren't footnotes 300 years ago in most Bibles.
Right.
There are footnotes.
Lots of them.
Lots of them in any Bible you pick up now. Because we know so much more. There's so much scholarly information. There's so many more copies of the Bible that are older that clearly have had scribal errors or corrections or modifications. And those are now on full disclosure. Which in and of itself, if you read some of those footnotes, you'll figure out pretty quickly that the argument of inerrancy is lost. It's already lost. Just read the footnotes.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. 100%.
I can't remember what page it is, but I want to say it's I want to say it's maybe a page in Isaiah that there's more footnotes on the page than there are scriptures. Once the Dead Sea Scrolls have been somewhat analyzed. So he said the next Bibles, there's going to be 2 or 3 pages that have so many footnotes that there's more footnotes than there are actual scripture in a couple of spots. So there's one of 2 of those now, but I don't remember where. Yeah, there is a book, and I want to say it's Daniel, but I'm not 100% positive that Daniel, there's variants of Daniel and the Dead Sea Scrolls that have 85% differences between, and it might not be Daniel, but about an 85% difference between the multiple copies of it.
That is insane.
And Kip was on someplace.
Hello?
Kip was on. Was it Derek
Davis?
Yeah, Dr. Kip was on with somebody, and basically it said some variation of the problems with Isaiah, and it sounds like the majority of the copies of Isaiah are similar, and there's very, very little differentiation. But there's one copy of Isaiah that's like almost as if it's a different book or something. I think he mentioned. I've drank some since then.
It's all good. All right. I want to play some more of that carrier piece. Thanks so much for joining me, Tux. And
yeah,
I'll be right back. And I want to get your thoughts on this as well.
On the carrier.
Wait, yeah.
That's right. That's how we got into the 1 Corinthians 15.
I did this wrong. I did this. We're not looking at the right screen here. All right, let's see. Is that the right one? Nope. Is that the right one? Nope. That's the right one. All right, I know what I got to do. Here we go.
I think I'm going to go brush my teeth and kiss Mrs. Tux.
All right. I'll see you.
Maybe I'll be back here in about 20 minutes.
All right, no worries. We'll see you in a little bit. If not, I'll catch you later. Thanks, Tux. You probably want to mute your mic, or I guess I'll mute him out for now.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Gang, just pretend I changed scenes 3 seconds ago. Yeah, changing scenes around here is like I got real stage hands that like actually have to like prepare a new scene backstage and like draw the curtains closed and shit.
This time you've got Luke, they're touching his hands and having fish with him, you know. If that can happen to the dead Jesus, right? Like if you can invent an actual dead Jesus walking around in that time, well, it's easier to invent the rest of Jesus, right? So the timelines are actually the same in terms of this invention. So it's very clear that you can invent whole people in a matter of 40 years, including, you know, resurrected Jesuses. So if you can do it with a resurrected Jesus, you can do it with a historical Jesus. And I make this point as well on the historicity of Jesus, but I have a lengthier point about it in Jesus from Outer Space.
It makes me think of something like, if the Christian creed goes back to pretty dang close, that they believed he rose from the dead, and you and me as naturalists honestly don't buy that this happened, there needs to be if we take the historical Jesus model, right, and we just forget the mythicist one for a second here, we would still go, okay, hold on. Like, if the body was missing, they still believed he was resurrected, or if the body was still there, and let's just imagine that someone believed he rose from the dead.
Within 40 years, you've got a month of fish dinners with Jesus, right, and with the dead Jesus, right. So like the rapidity with which ridiculous factual history gets invented is obvious and demonstrable. So the one argument left is that there's not enough time is false. So once you get rid of that, there's no like reference class argument to say that, oh, typically they waited hundreds of years. It's like, that isn't really the causal factor. The causal factor is how are they deciding where to place them? And it's always a politically meaningful place where they put them. So the length of time is irrelevant. It has more to do with why they're putting them there rather than some other time. And so once you understand that this doesn't become an argument against anything, really. It's no more an argument for the historical Jesus than it's an argument for an actual historical physical resurrection of Jesus, you know, the fish dinner Jesus.
Right.
So you know, it's the same reason you would reject that is the same reason you would reject that argument for the historical Jesus.
There are some who even posit like the destruction of the Jerusalem temple being a political thing that is obviously having a replacement religion, as you talk about with Mark.
Like there's the argument of the 40-year clock, right? So so there's like numerological reasons to put Jesus in the 30s AD. And I talk about that too, actually, in chapter 8. The first thing I talk about in chapter 8 of on the history of Jesus is where they put him historically. And sometimes they put him in the 50s AD, sometimes they put him in the 30s, sometimes they put him in the 70s BC. And some of this looks like numerological logic rather than anything else. So there's a lot of different reasons why they could put Jesus in different places. And they actually did put Jesus in multiple different periods. So it has more to do with their thinking as to why he needs to be there, rather than how much time has to pass is the key.
All right, there we go. I don't know why the hell's things so damn slow today. But yeah, y'all, I'm going to call it. It's been fun. I appreciate all your support for the stream over on Skeptic Haven. Come link up with the gang and gather. We'll be in the Pinnacle Lounge in the ranch. And otherwise, we'll catch you tomorrow in the name of the Darwin, the Dawkins, and the Christopher Hitchens. Science bless you all. Good night. Poof.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights when they been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the house not a home. Sunshine cause you heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win. Now I got it, you ain't answer my call. Wonder if I've been moving too strong. Maybe I just been moving too balls. Really hate when the feeling get lost. Nowadays she just dodge my calls. In the game throwing laws like Paul. Young legend Miss John like Wall. And I wish you never met like Carl. Dick game lay it down like law. Made plans but you canceled them all. I was just trying to splurge in the mall. Now I'm home stacking bread till you call.
It's time to roll. She tryna slide. We smoking Zah. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl. It's time to roll. She tryna ride. We smoking. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl.
We smoking that side. I'm tryna get high. She said that she not ready for love, stop wasting my time.